Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, Madame le greffier.
Monsieur le Sénateur Gorst.
Présent.
Monsieur le Sénateur Farnham.
Présent.
Madame le Sénateur Ferguson.
Présente.
Monsieur le Sénateur Lefondre. Madame le Sénateur Valois.
Present.
Madame le Sénateur Moore.
Present.
Monsieur le Sénateur Hallett.
Présent.
Monsieur le Sénateur Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Hélier.
Présent.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Present.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présente.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Brelade.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Grouville.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Southern. Madame le Deputy de Grouville.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Lewis.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Tadier.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Higgins. Monsieur le Deputy Masson.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Pinel.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Martin.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Dublay. Monsieur le Deputy Labbé.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Wickenden.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Truscott.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Young.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Ash.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Morel.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Guida.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Lehegara.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Ayer.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Pershar. Monsieur le Deputy Ward.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Alves.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Pamplin.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Gardner.
Présente.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et la puissance de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, donner le cœur et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, de la conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute leur délibération est accompagnée de la bénédiction. Réussisse au bien et au soulagement du peuple, qu'il te plu de commettre à leurs soins. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par les mérites de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné à t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite en la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous envoie pas en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi la reine, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Monsieur le Sénateur Lefondre.
Excusez.
Monsieur le Deputy Southern.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Higgins.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Dublay.
Excusez.
Madame la Deputy Pershard.
Don't think we heard anything then.
No.
Excusez. Les étapes sont constituées. Before we resume public business, I'd like to welcome, albeit briefly, to the public gallery, Bishop Wilmot, recently retired Bishop of Dover, and his wife Margaret and Lady Dalton. Bishop Trevor will be known to some of you, maybe many of you. He served as Bishop of Basingstoke in the Diocese of Winchester from 2002 until 2009, and in 2010 moved to Canterbury to become Bishop of Dover. And it was during this time, in 2013, that he was asked to take on the episcopal oversight of the Channel Islands, owing to the breakdown in the relationship between the islands and the Bishop of Winchester. He not only facilitated the move to the Diocese of Canterbury, where for the next 7 years, the Jersey churches and their clergy received a warm welcome and a safe harbour, but during this period he mediated on the island's behalf in a wider conversation with the Church of England about their future status, leading to the Archbishop's Commission in 2019. This process ended with the recommendation that the Deanery of Jersey should become part of the Diocese of Salisbury. Bishop Trevor retired as Bishop of Dover in 2019, but he remains Bishop of Jersey and Guernsey and the other Channel Islands, and accordingly, for the first time in several centuries, possibly ever, we have a Bishop of the Islands looking after our interests until the legal transfer to Salisbury is complete. This will be the last formal visit of Bishop Trevor and Margaret to Jersey, and we are grateful for his care and wisdom during a difficult period for the Anglican Church in Jersey, and we thank him for his oversight. There will be a service at 6 p.m. this evening in the town church to mark his ministry, to which everyone is welcome. We now return to, and just to let you know, Bishop, there has been some approbation in the chat, which is a virtual form of foot stamping. Now, we return to public business. The first item is to deal with the reduction of minimum lodging periods in respect of several matters listed on the order paper, so that we know what we are not and are not dealing with during the course of the remainder of this week. The first item is the draft Public Health and Safety Rented Dwellings Licensing Jersey Regulations Amendment lodged by the Minister for the Environment. Minister, do you wish to make the proposition under Standing Order 26.7 that the lodging period be reduced to allow this matter to be debated at this sitting?
Yes, sir, I do. Would you like me to do that now?
Yes.
Well, look, I don't have to dwell on this. I think members know the long history of this. We have a lot of business to clear during the remainder of this parliamentary term, and particularly 60 amendments in the island plan, carbon neutral, and a whole amount of work. And this particular matter has, I think, bogged us down rather. The majority recently approved a proposition from Deputy Ward, which the states have approved, and what the amendment that I lodged gave effect to that, and therefore it's a matter that I take the view that this has already been discussed by the states, and we should clear it out. And whichever way it goes, sir, I think I'm asking members, please, to debate it. Let's get this matter one way or the other, whichever way the vote goes, finalised, sir. And that's, I think to have it dragging around again until the autumn will cause a lot of unnecessary division. The matter is straightforward. There should be uncomplicated now. I know there are members that just don't like the idea at all, and there are other members who are in favour of it. And of course, what I really hope that the debate goes ahead and we get a very clear-cut debate without getting bogged down in a lot of complex technicalities, which frankly I don't think there's a need for. So I'm not going to say any more. We've got a lot of business. I'm going to try and expedite and ask the members to support taking it during this session, please. This sitting. Thank you.
Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Connétable St Brelard.
Thank you, sir. I would just like to respond to the Minister by saying that rushing business is not good practice. There are several holes in the proposition, which I will be addressing later. But I think that given the history of this, as the Minister suggests, there is considerable application needed. And whilst I don't object to the inclusion of the addendum in the amendment in this sitting, I would counsel care in rushing things through the states. Thank you, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? I call upon the Minister to reply.
No, sir, I don't think I do. I think it's for the members to decide, sir, as I've said. And of course, I wouldn't intend to rush it. And if there are concerns, if we have the debate, which I hope we do, I will absolutely do my best, as I always do, to deal with them. Rushing is not my seat. Thank you, sir. But I think we need to deal with it today. Thank you.
Thank you. In a moment, the greffier will add a vote into the chat channel of the meeting. Vote is now open. I'll ask members to cast their votes.
Sir, could we have a bit more time, please? The system's thinking.
Yes,
Yes.
sir, could I have clear instructions of what I'm voting for or against?
Yes, yes, of course. So the proposal is to reduce the lodging period in respect of the Minister's amendment to the draft Public Health and Safety Rented Dwellings Licensing Jersey Regulations P33. And if you agree with the proposition that the lodging period should be reduced, you vote pour, and if you disagree, then you vote contre.
Thank you, sir. That's perfectly clear.
How many now, Greffier? Yes, process in the chat. If all members have the opportunity to cast their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. And the proposition has been adopted. 32 votes pour on the link, 5 votes contra, and in the chat, by my reckoning, 4 votes pour and another vote contra, which makes 36 votes pour and 6 votes contra. The next item has been.
Tadius asked for those voting contra.
Oh yes, of course, Deputy. Yes, you have the contra, please.
Those voting contra, the Connétable of Brouville, Deputy Lahegara, Senator Farnham, Deputy Morale, the Connétable of St Brelard. That's in the link.
The next item has been lodged by the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel and is the amendment to Channel Islands Lottery allocation of proceeds from 2020 P53. Deputy of St Mary, do you wish to make the proposition under Standing Order 26.7 that the lodging period be reduced to allow this matter to be debated at this sitting?
Yes, please, sir, I do. I should perhaps mention that the amendment was in fact lodged with the graph in time, and it appears there was some administrative delay between that office and the bailiff's office as to it being approved. I also add, sir, that the Deputy Morell, as Assistant Minister to the appropriate department, has kindly agreed to accept the amendment if the Assembly so allows it to go through. Thanks, sir.
Is the amendment, is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? Yes, Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir, and I'd like to thank the scrutiny panel for lodging the amendment. And it was just to say, to confirm, as Deputy St Mary has said, that I'd be happy for the proposition when it comes to that time to be read as amended, if the states are willing. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? If not, I call upon the Deputy to reply.
Well, thank you, sir. I maintain the proposition, sir, and I thank the Assistant Minister for his support in this. Thank you, sir.
Yes. In a moment, the graphier will add a vote into the chat channel of this meeting. She has done so. The vote is now open, and I ask members to cast their votes.
So my vote seems to be taken a long. Oh, it's okay. It's just gone through. Sorry.
Right. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the graphier to close the voting. The proposition to reduce the lodging period in relation to this matter has been adopted unanimously. 38 votes in the link and 3 votes in the chat, with no votes contra or abstentions. The next item that has been lodged is by the Minister for Infrastructure and is an amendment to the draft single-use plastics, etc. restrictions Jersey law P61. The Minister, do you wish to make the proposition under Standing Order 26.7 that the lodging period be reduced to allow this matter to be debated at this sitting?
Yes, please, sir. I'd be obliged. It should be expiring on the 21st of July, so I'd be obliged if members would agree to bring that forward. It's all to do with timings. P61 amend plastics, sir. Thank you.
Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does anyone wish to speak on the proposition? Does any member object to us proceeding in relation to this particular matter on a standing vote?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. In a moment, the graphier will add a vote into the chat channel of this meeting. Vote is now open, and I ask members to cast their votes. If all members have the opportunity of voting, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. And the proposition has been adopted. On the link, 38 votes for and 1 contra, and in the chat, 1 vote for and 3 votes contra, making a total of 39 votes for and 4 votes contra.
I'm obliged to members, sir.
The next item has been lodged by the Conotab of St Helier and is the second amendment to the draft single-use plastics restrictions Jersey law, P61. Conotab, do you wish to make the proposition under the standing orders 26.7 that the lodging period be reduced to allow this matter to be debated at the sitting?
Yes, please, sir.
Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? In a moment, the greffier will add a vote into the chat channel of this meeting. The vote is now open, and I ask members to cast their votes. All members have had the opportunity of voting. I ask the greffier to close the voting. And the proposition to reduce the lodging period has been adopted. On the link, 28 votes for and 2 votes contra. In the chat, 2 votes before the voting closed, so 40 votes for and 2 votes contra. The next item, lodged by the Minister for Housing and Communities.
Sir?
Yes?
It's Deputy Gardiner. I have lodged
Yes.
amendment to the Constable's amendment yesterday, and it has been added to the.
Yes, Deputy Gardiner. I'm going to come to the 2 amendments which require not merely a reduction of the lodging period, but also suspension of the standing orders under Standing Order 80 at the end of the list.
I understand. I just think that it was connected to the previous amendment. This is the reason. Okay, I understand. Thank you, sir.
Yes, let me just Yes, I think in the context, Deputy Garner, because that will leave 2 matters left which are connected because they relate to the Le Keneve Park Flats loan scheme. It might be appropriate to deal with your matter now. So this is one of the 2 matters not on the order paper, an amendment by Deputy Gardiner to the second amendment to P61. Deputy Gardiner, do you wish to make the proposition, firstly, that standing orders be suspended under Standing Order 80 to allow this matter to be listed, and that understanding to suspend Standing Order 32, the matter may be listed, and yes, I'm going to, yes, and that under Standing Order 26.7, the lodging period be reduced so the matter can be taken at this meeting. Is that your proposition?
Yes, sir, please. It was an amendment to the Constable Amendment, and I need to move quickly to be able to debate it as a whole package.
Yes. Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak on Deputy Gardner's proposal? Thank you. In a moment, the greffier will add a vote into the chat channel of this meeting. He has done so. The vote is now open, and I ask members to cast their vote. If all members have the opportunity of voting, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been adopted. 37 votes pour on the link and 3 votes pour on the chat, making a total of 40 votes pour and 2 votes contra. The next matter has been lodged by the Minister for Housing and Communities. The Les Kennebec Park Flats Loan Scheme revised terms and the amendment to that proposition. Minister, do you wish to make the proposition under Standing Order 26.7 that the lodging period be reduced to allow these matters to be debated at this sitting?
I do, please, sir. The States has, in fact, voted to approve this proposition twice already, effectively. I've written to members and spoken in the past about the time sensitivities here, and it's very definitely in the public interest of residents and owners of these properties that we get this matter, help to get this matter sorted out as quickly as possible. So I hope members will allow me to take this in this sitting. Thank you, sir.
Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on this proposition? No member wishes to speak. Then I invite the greffier to put a vote into the chat channel of this meeting. Vote is now open, and I ask members to cast their votes. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition to reduce the lodging period in relation to this matter has been adopted. 37 votes pour on the link and 3 votes pour in the chat, making a total of 40 votes pour and 1 vote contra. The next item.
We have the one, please, sir.
Yes, of course.
The vote contra was Deputy Lahegre.
The next item is a second amendment to P71 lodged by Deputy Tadier. This item was not listed on for this meeting. So, Deputy, do you wish to first make the proposition under Standing Order 80 to suspend Standing Order 32 so that the matter can be debated at this meeting, and secondly, under Standing Order 26.7 to reduce the minimum lodging period in order that can be taken at this meeting.
Yes, please, sir.
Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the proposition?
So should I have explained why I'm asking for that, or do you think it's self-evident?
Well, you've made the proposition now. I don't think I have a chance to reply unless someone
Yeah, thanks. You didn't invite me to speak.
makes a
that's all, but
speech.
Happy to. That's okay.
In a moment, the greffier will add a vote into the chat channel of the meeting. The vote is now open, and I ask members to cast their votes. If members have the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. Proposition has been adopted. 35 votes for in the link and 1 in the chat, making 36 votes for and 1 vote contra. Returning to the order paper, the first item is the draft Public Health and Safety Rented Dwellings Licensing Jersey Regulations, P33, lodged by the Minister for Infrastructure. For the purpose of this debate, the main respondent will be the chair of the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel. I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Public Health and Safety Rented Dwellings Licence and Jersey Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Article 5 of the Public Health and Safety Rented Dwellings Jersey Law 2018.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. So today, I ask the Assembly to consider the draft Public Health and Safety Rented Dwellings Licensing Jersey Regulations as amended, sir. Can I just clarify, was the proposition agreed as amended that I could propose that? Sorry, I missed that point.
No, it's not been agreed that you read the proposition as amended.
I see.
Yes. The amendment will come when we get to the articles.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for clearing that up. I apologise for that. It must be the temperature in this room.
Well, it's warm here as well.
Yes, thank you. So these draft regulations are enabled under the Public Health and Safety Rented Dwellings Jersey Law, which was 2018, which was approved by the Assembly in a previous life, as it were, before current Council of Ministers. And they, of course, are put into practice through the Minimum Standards and Prescribed Hazards Order, which was approved in 2018. That was after the elections, which sets out all the detail required and the standards required by rented dwellings. So we have the law in place, and the law is there, and the standards expected. What these regulations, I think the members know them probably very well indeed. And if what we have on the table today is in effect, I have to say, in the amended form, they implement the decision taken on the 8th of June by the Assembly to adopt Deputy Ward's proposition P20. But in any event, obviously, since I'm dealing with the original version, what the regulations do is implement a scheme of regulation and licensing, which I think effectively deals with all of the objections and concerns that were raised previously in the earlier iterative version that was brought in, that came forward before the Assembly in 2019, that just failed to secure a majority by quite a narrow vote, I think. But nonetheless, there were issues in that members identified that they wanted to see corrected, and those regulations now are the regulations on the table now deal with that. And so the regulations as lodged, this is P33, approve a scheme with nil charge. Initially, the regulations, this is what they would do to implement the scheme with nil charge, and they would provide for a grandfathering period for when after the law comes into effect, and the law will come into effect during next year. There is obviously the amendment would have the details slightly varying that, but nonetheless the law would not come into place until 2022. The amendment says March, and there will be a grandfather period in order to allow properties that are already being rented out to be able to comply with the new law and be licensed, and without any fees during that grandfathering period. The regulations unamended propose a grandfathering period which would last until the end of 22. The amendment brings that slightly forward, and of course, just to remind you, that amendment was done at the state's behest, as it were. But nonetheless, the point of principle is that the law is not introduced, does not have effect until 2022, so there's plenty of time for any preparation and adjustment that's necessary, and also there is a grandfather period. And of course, the proposal, again, the unamended version, would provide for that license to be for 3 years, and that means that the people that are grandfathered, their licenses would not pay. They'd get licenses and would not pay any fees for the first licensing period of 3 years. And of course, the amendment, which I hope to be able to go on and deal with, makes that 5 years. So for 5 years until 2027, those existing properties and tenants, landlords, would not have to meet that cost. They would come into line with the scheme, and that, I think, was what I believe the states wanted to happen. They didn't want they having an overhead being imposed very early on. Now, of course, the issue is that the regulations are actually silent on the question of the fees, because the law, that's the substantive law, gives that power to the minister, and the amendment that was done gives effect to a way in which the states can influence that decision. So I think the issue is, well, obviously there's been a lot of issues. Is this necessary? The advice I've had continually from the environmental health team is that there are still properties that are not meeting minimum standards, and that the advice, unequivocal advice I've had, is that in order to be able to achieve a higher level of compliance, a licensing scheme of this nature will enable a much more effective implementation and compliance arrangement. And it is not, I don't believe this is a big brother or any way a threat to anybody, because people that have properties, and maybe, sir, I've just realised I should have declared an interest as a landlord myself. I apologise, sir, I should have done that at the outset. That I have a small property which I have let out, and so, but I don't fear in any way these regulations, nor do I believe anybody else does. But I have to listen to the professional standards, and they do get complaints. And what I've heard is that people that are experienced problem properties are reluctant to come forward and make complaints or about the problems they are having to deal with. And I think some of those are really quite very serious. I mean, for example, that I cited electrical installations, and I think in recent years, under new building regs, we've been able to have an effective, a greater improvement in building standards and bylaws, building bylaws, and electrical standards are really higher. But of course, when people rent properties, they don't have the ability to be able to alter. They have to take what they are, what systems there are in properties. And there are a lot of very old properties with substandard systems and potentially dangerous. And so having a system whereby they're subject included to an inspection of safety is really an important thing. And of course, we cleared that up. Originally, there was ambiguity about how often a certificate of electrical inspection would work for. We've now got it in 5 years. And I don't think there's any grounds for any worry about that. 5 years is a very good period, I think, to have a buildings checked out. And of course, also the emissions from heating systems and the like, where you've got carbon monoxide possibilities, and you know, these things do go wrong. So annual checks on those things, which are part of a requirement to meet minister. There's nothing, I don't believe there's anything to fear. And so I've listened to that, and I've accepted the advice that based on practice elsewhere, and it isn't just in places, you know, in London, big cities in Britain, that these schemes apply. No, they're in other places as well. And I think I know that this is being widely considered elsewhere. And I think the way I think this would go is that the period of grandfathering would enable us to know which properties we're dealing with, because at the moment it is kind of, I'm afraid, it's a potluck situation. In the island plan work, one has only been able to estimate the number of rental dwellings in the island. Yes, we discussed this before in the issue of registration and I absolutely agree that there is a requirement for registration for lots of purposes, way beyond the issue of minimum standard for residential dwellings, because we need to know who owns those properties, what are they used for, where are they, what is their ownership structure. There's money laundering issues as well. There's the issues of, we face choices about buy-to-lets and all those things. We desperately need to know, I believe, as a government, and in terms of our strategic planning, about our property estate in the island, and what's it used for, and how we can get better use of it. So obviously that's the story for another day. We've already agreed that. But so I'm not denigrating the issue of registration, but that does not deal with the issue of compliance with minimum standards. This is a very narrow and focused tasks. And people have spoken about bureaucracy. We're talking about a small team. And there's been a lot of fuss about costs, which I'm not going to dwell on. There's that team, what has happened as a result of government changes since environmental health came over, there's been an adjustment, people have left, people have been reassigned to different roles, and they've developed a specialism in the area of housing. They've made very, very good work already, and I know the scrutiny panel will probably comment on this, built with the voluntary scheme that have gone on so far, which is Rent Safe, which I think is well understood, well liked, doesn't cost any money, and it's helped a lot of property agents and landlords to get that accreditation. But that's not, it does not do the whole job. And this is the ingredient that is necessary. And I'm going to ask the States members today. I've probably gone on a bit too long. I hadn't intended to do that. I apologise. But I think we need to clear this matter up now and leave this assembly in a position where we've implemented a law. We've done our best to do it effectively, and we've allowed a sensible arrangement for transition. So if there's adjustments necessary in 22 after the next elections, in the way the scheme works and so on, that can all be done and taken that time. But this time it will be based on the knowledge that we know what properties they are, where they are, what they're being used of, the size of them, the number of persons they're being used for occupation of, and so on. And this is about the properties. It is not about landlords. There is no registration of landlords going on here. It's the registration of properties. Landlords registration is what happens in the UK. This is not what is proposed. It's about property. So look, I think I hopefully I'll get a chance. No, the amendment. I think now we're going to have obviously the debate now on the principle, and I hope we do get a chance to talk about the amendments if members back the principle of these regulations. So thank you. I will try and do my best to answer questions. So thank you.
Are the principles seconded?
Yes, sir.
There are a number of declarations of interests that are made of the chat, which I'll now formally read into the record. I will assume that those are declarations of interest as a landlord, unless otherwise stated. Senator Le Fondre makes a declaration, presumably as a landlord. Senator Gorse makes a declaration as a landlord. Senator Moore makes a declaration as a landlord. The Deputy of St Martin makes a declaration as a landlord, as does the Deputy of St Peter. Deputy Gardner makes a declaration that her husband is a landlord. Deputy Truscott makes a declaration as a landlord. Senator Mesick declares that he is a tenant. Deputy of St Martin of Trinity makes a declaration that he is a landlord. Deputy Greville declares that she is a landlord. The Conotab of Greville makes a declaration as a landlord. Deputy Tadier makes a declaration that his fiancée is a landlord. Deputy Morell declares that he is a landlord. Deputy Guida declares he's a landlord. Deputy Pinnell declares that she is a landlord. The Conotab of St One declares that he is a landlord. The Conotab of St Helier declares that his partner is a landlord. Deputy St Mary declares he's a landlord. Deputy Young has recently declared that he is a landlord. The Conotab of St Mary declares he's a landlord. Deputy Martin declares she is a tenant. And the Conotab of St Peter declares that his daughter lives in a house owned by him. The next member to speak is the Conotab of St Brelard.
Thank you, sir. I propose to incorporate a degree of the amendment in my speech rather than speak twice. The detail of the amendment is not great in terms of date changes and such like, so I don't think it makes a fundamental difference. So none of us consider the motivation behind the proposed regulations, which would implement a scheme with nil charge, requiring landlords to register or license their properties for the purposes of renting, and which will maintain a quality standard, is anything but perfectly credible. To use a well-coined phrase, sir, the devil is in the detail. And the closeness of previous votes demonstrates the discomfort which many members have with the proposals. The Minister makes much in his proposition about the difference between registration and licensing, and members need to understand that the proposed licensing scheme would prevent any property of any description being used as a rented dwelling unless licensed by his department. The department, sir, is responsible for enforcement, but we are regularly told by the Minister that under the present government structure that he has insufficient staff. We're told that officers from the departments will be carrying out proactive inspections over an extended period on various details of properties as part of a licence application. Well, sir, I would suggest that if those properties are already let, the tenants will soon become tired of these intrusions, and if they are not let, it will simply create a delay in getting potentially rentable property onto the market. The Minister draws our attention, sir, to continued non-compliance with minimum standards in rented dwellings. This needs further analysis, in that it's very easy to conflate the effects of poor tenant behaviour, such as failing to ventilate a property with mildew on walls, which is often attributed to landlord. The requisite electrical tests to which the Minister alluded earlier are successful, and I think any landlord is, a reasonable landlord is certainly compliant on that level and would wish to be so. Much is made, sir, of the fear of eviction by those who may make complaints. There is no evidence of this occurring. Maybe, sir, there is, maybe, sir, because there must be a degree of shared responsibility in any tenant-landlord relationship. It may be more about that relationship than the actual condition of the property. The Minister has offered what I would term sweeteners in the guise of long lead-in times not coming to force until the 3rd of June 22, grandfather rights to encourage everyone to apply, and 3-year licences. My panel, sir, has engaged with landlords who have been proactive in trying to come up with an equitable solution to ensure that rogue landlords are controlled, to ensure minimum standards prevail in rented property. Subsequent to previous debates, we have so been proactive in trying to achieve a balanced solution. We requested views and comments from both the Jersey Landlords Association and the Jersey Tenants Forum to inform our review. We received a submission from the landlords on the 21st of May. We sent a follow-up email to the tenants representative, reiterating the importance of receiving their view to inform our comments, and extended the time until the 24th of May. No comments were received until after the deadline, sir. The Jersey Tenants Forum submitted comments on the panel's comments, but no evidence. Subsequent to P20 being passed by the Assembly, the panel invited once again both the Jersey Landlords Association and the Jersey Tenants Forum to separately discuss their views. The panel met several members of the Jersey Landlords Association and the one member of the Jersey Tenants Forum, which it appears is just a Facebook page operated by one individual. It came to light that the Jersey Tenant Forum representative was content that he had consulted the Minister regarding the proposed licensing scheme. However, it was the view of the Jersey Landlords Association representatives that the Minister had been reluctant to meet. They conveyed that they welcomed an opportunity to enter into consultative processes with the Minister to come to a solution that may be acceptable to all stakeholders prior to the debate today. This hasn't happened, sir. We wrote on 15th of July requesting the Minister to delay the debate to allow further consultation with the Landlords Association, given that there were areas of P20 which could be amended to find a middle ground and be acceptable to all parties. This wasn't agreed, sir. The principal concern of the Jersey Landlords Association was that there was a lack of transparency over the form that the inspection regime will take. Proposed licensing conditions were poorly thought out, and that the cost-benefit analysis hadn't been fully considered. Will licensing be the most effective way of accomplishing the aims? And if so, where will the cost of the scheme fall? On landlords and consequently tenants, or indeed on the taxpayer, sir? There is evidence to suggest that a number of landlords are selling their rental properties to private families and leaving the rental market, thus resulting in a loss of rented dwellings to the detriment of those people renting and unable to buy property. We understand, sir, this is a direct result of a threat of legislation such as a licensing scheme, which will ultimately make housing affordability issues worse, not better. Now we come to the fees, sir. I quote from page 3 of the proposition, that these regulations, if approved, would implement a suitable licensing scheme with nil charge. The minister is a nice chap, if I may say so, sir, but has been, I might suggest, cute in suggesting on page 4 of the proposition that no fees will be applied on his watch. All will change, however, sir, on the 31st of December 2025, and I quote, unless the minister decides to introduce a fee. The suggestion that a fee be determined, which is proportionate to the cost of licensing and equitable in regulating the activity, is a form of words that concern me greatly. I'm not a betting man, sir, but I think there is a certainty that fees will be imposed. Those charges will be passed on by landlords to the ultimate detriment of the tenant. Anyone who thinks otherwise, sir, is being horribly naive, and Article 3, brackets 5 confirms that. Yes, sir, the minister's amendment obliges him to give the state 6 weeks notice, but the reality is that it'll be terribly easy for this to be slipped through in the morass of other business of the states. The quantum of proposed charges is not clear, sir. The proposition infers that there will be financial implications. The amendment goes further and is more transparent in that it suggests that the historic deficit of £1 million will need to be addressed. But the future minister will be able to consult on whether or not to charge it. I can confidently predict, sir, which way that will go. In summary, I would contend that members will be very short-sighted in adopting this proposition as tabled today without being aware of the cost implications. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. And I'm very disappointed to have to follow the previous speaker, who I think has made quite a few points which are simply illegitimate and don't really match up with the facts of the situation we find ourselves in, and continues to perpetuate the division that there is on this subject by claiming that it's down to not working together properly, not consulting properly, etc., etc., when the reality is, sir, that there are people who just don't agree. That's it. It's not that the minister has done a bad job. It's not that the minister hasn't attempted to speak to the right people. It's not that what he's come up with is inequitable. It's just there are some people who perhaps perfectly legitimately don't agree. And that's it, and that's fine. That's democracy. But so we have had this debate in this assembly. We debated the previous proposition from Deputy Ward and it was accepted. And I hope that this assembly will simply ratify that decision by implementing the regulations which this assembly asked the minister to go ahead and lodge, which is what he's done in lodging this with the amendment. And I keep going back to the name of these regulations, which is that little bit in brackets which says health and safety, because that is fundamentally what all of this is about. It's about making sure that those who are in private rental tenancies and social rental tenancies as well, for that matter, are living in homes which are healthy and safe for them, and that there is an effective regime underpinning it, which is not overbearing, which is not authoritarian, which is light touch and proportionate, just to make sure that those minimum standards which already exist in law are appropriately implemented in reality, so that we can have confidence that everybody who's living in a rental home is able to live their life happily with the security of knowing that their home is safe for them. That as an aim is absolutely right, but I think that we really do risk going round in circles. This is the culmination of 3 years' work. And I'm sorry to say to the previous speaker, but this really has been done to death now. Different iterations have come up, and I think that there are some people who simply will never be pleased. The previous speaker said that there hasn't really been consultation with the Jersey Landlords Association. I'm sorry, sir, but I just reject that. There, of course, has been extensive consultation with the Jersey Landlords Association in all sorts of different formats. And I personally met with the head of the JLA when I was Minister for Housing. There have been multiple scrutiny reports into this, and I personally attended a in fact, I attended 2 meetings, although I know as a fact that more were held. I only attended the ones that I was available for. I attended a big public meeting at the town hall, which was organised by the Jersey Landlords Association, who had the Minister and environmental health officers up on the platform with them, invited there to present to the members who were there present. And I also attended workshops that were headed by the then head of environmental health, with any landlord who was invited to come along. And that was an open event that they took feedback from, were able to answer questions. So please, sir, can we not have this argument about there being no consultation on this, because it's just not reality. There certainly was consultation. I witnessed it. People were invited, people attended. There is simply a number of people who are aggrieved that at the end of that consultation, the conclusion has been that the points they were making have not been accepted. And it's fair to be aggrieved, but it's not fair to say that there was no consultation. And the point has to be made, sir, that the numbers of people who are opposed to this scheme are a very, very small minority. In fact, they're a minority within a minority. And the number of landlords, as far as I can work out from available statistics in what the Landlords Association have said their membership numbers are, versus the declared number of landlords, which has been revealed through a Freedom of Information request through declared rent income for tax, is that the JLA represent about 3% of landlords on the island. And not only do not all of the JLA members oppose this these regulations, there are JLA members who actually support this and who say that this supports good landlords, that it won't affect those who are doing the right thing already in any shape or form at all, apart from having to fill out a form basically every 5 years and maybe make themselves available for 20 minutes whilst an inspector comes and checks the flat. Whereas for the other 4 years, 364 days of the year, it won't impact on them at all, and they won't be paying a fee. Most of them are all right. Virtually all of the landlords I speak to who aren't members of the JLA are wholeheartedly in support of this as well. And the feedback that was presented to us by the previous speaker about a worry about landlords selling up their properties because they're annoyed about extra bureaucracy that's being applied to them once every 5 years simply doesn't match the reality, sir. It is not the case that we are seeing a dearth of private rental accommodation accessible in the market because of this. Freedom of Information request has shown that year on year for the past 5 years, the number of people declaring as landlords has gone up every single year. So can we please not accept this line coming from the JLA that the number of landlords is going down? It isn't. It may well be the case that their membership is going down, because on this instance, they're not being reflective of the desire, certainly that I can witness, of most landlords out there. It is not the case that this is causing a mass exodus out of the market, which is harming tenants. It's just not the case. And of course, when you speak to tenants, they are all wholeheartedly supportive of this scheme because they know that it'll have a positive impact in their lives, that it will make the rights that they currently have in theory rights that will be applicable in practice, and that they will be able to have the security of knowing that these rights can be applied without any comeuppance back against them. And the previous speaker spoke about trying to come up with some equitable solution. I think equitable was the word he used, or a middle ground was the other words he used. And so there is an equitable solution, there is a middle ground. It's this proposition. The alternatives simply don't do what our intention is to achieve with these regulations. I've read the document that's gone round from the JLA proposing alternatives, where they say that tenants need to have a complaints mechanism where they can't face revenge evictions afterwards. Well, that's a nice idea, but how do you actually implement a system where you complain without facing a revenge eviction? There's only 2 ways really we can do that. One is to adopt open-ended tenancies, and the States has already rejected that. Or it's to have a licensing scheme where the inspections are proactive, rather than reactive. Those are the only two ways to do it. So it's no good to say let's strengthen tenants' rights if you don't actually have a concrete proposal to achieve that. Without that, what we end up doing is continuing to go round in circles year after year after year on this subject. The fact of the matter is that what the Environment Minister is proposing, after having been adopted by the States Assembly at a previous sitting, is that this proposal will make sure that those minimum standards are applicable in practice, can be enforced, where bad landlords can be prevented from renting properties out which are unsafe for tenants to live in, and can be required to make the adjustments that they should already be making under the law, but are getting away with it because we don't have the infrastructure to implement those rights. This gets that done. The bureaucracy that comes with it is absolutely minimal. It's basically a form every 5 years, and perhaps make yourself available for a little bit of time. And I think so that when you are in business, which is what being a landlord is, when you're making money out of this, you know, being a landlord is not a charity, it's a business where you make money out of it. I don't think that's a lot to ask for, especially when you compare it with what virtually every other business enterprise will have to do, where they'll have to file accounts annually with the JFSC, have their trading name registered and pay for that, be data protection registered and have to pay for that. And depending on what industry it is, there may be industry fees they have to pay. If it's a restaurant or that sort of enterprise, there are health and safety inspections which are compulsory, and you have to pay the licensing fee, and the inspections come much more frequently than's proposed here. So this is about as light touch as it can possibly get. I think actually those who are in business as landlords have a really good deal here, where if you're a decent landlord doing the right thing, meeting all of those minimum standards, you are not even going to notice this regime exists. The ones who will notice it will be either the bad landlords who will get in trouble as a result of this, and I say good riddance to them, and nobody should be standing up for those people, or there will be some perfectly well-intentioned landlords who, for honest and sincere reasons, may be inadvertently falling short of what the minimum standards are right now, and with an inspection will get free advice. Somebody turning up and saying, oh, by the way, you might not have noticed, but there's a problem with X, Y, and Z. You'll just want to get that sorted. And the landlord will be able to resolve that, don't have to pay for the privilege of getting that advice in the first place, and then will avoid any potential legal difficulties in future if there was a complaint or if something did go wrong, and all the insurance problems that there would potentially be as well if they were in breach of the law and somebody got hurt as well. So there are only positive effects of this for everyone except for the bad landlords, and those are not the people we should be standing up for. So I really hope that the Assembly will disregard the comments of the previous speaker, many of which I think can be demonstrated to not be accurate, and to ratify the decision that we made at the previous state sitting to implement these regulations, get this over the line, get it over and done with, because if we don't, this is just going to come back and back again, because the alternatives that are being proposed simply don't do what they need to do. And we are at a point where it is just disagreement now, and at some point the majority has to win. And I hope the majority is in favour of these, because those who are arguing against it, I'm afraid, just don't have the decent alternative proposed, and we're going to keep going round in circles and people suffer in the meantime. So I urge members to support the regulations.
Thank you, Senator. Does any member wish to speak on the principles? Yes, Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. Sir, there's a well-known phrase, and please excuse one word of the poor language, and that phrase is, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, sir. And it strikes me that certainly I've just listened to Senator Mezek, and there's no question his intentions are good, but where he leads us overall, not just in regard to this, may not be such a comfortable place for the island. So there's an issue in terms of the regulation, the constant wave after wave of regulation that this island is kind of bringing upon itself, that we're drowning in, the constant increase in the size of government, that in order to enforce regulations in various areas, not just this one, has to obviously employ more and more people. As a result, we have seen, sir, the constant increase in the size of the government in terms of its number of employees, which for 10 years was 13% of the workforce, but that workforce was constantly growing, and the government was growing too, and now has actually gone beyond that and is now 14% of the island's workforce now works for the government of Jersey, sir. There's no question in my mind that this is yet again another wave of regulation that will break on our island shores and will increase costs, not just for landlords, not just for tenants. It's increasing costs throughout governance. In fact, how much are those costs? It's very simple. The costs of this scheme, sir, come to £1 million a year. That's how much the government will be paying to satisfy the needs of these regulations. That's £1 million that's not being spent elsewhere, sir. And as well as that £1 million, the government will be employing 6 people, which it has already employed, because there was a certain, if I may say, arrogance in the belief, and I saw this when I was on the Environment Scrutiny Panel, in the belief that these regulations would go through, therefore the department employed them in advance of the regulations going through. That's at a time when the very same department cannot employ enough planning enforcement inspectors. And as a result, we know, and I think every single states member knows, that planning breaches are taking place on a daily basis and are unable to be witnessed by officials and are unable to be rectified by officials, because there are no officials, or very few. I think there's 1.5 currently, sir, and we've seen nearly 300 outstanding cases and over 500 outstanding planning applications. So this is a department which cannot afford to be diverting its attention from its the obligations that it already has, but it will be, and as a result, 6 people are going to be used in this licensing scheme, 6 new 6 people to police these new regulations, and they will spend £1 million doing so. There's no question in my mind, of course, the department will try and get out of that £1 million as quickly as possible and will pass on the costs to landlords and then on to tenants very quickly as soon as it can. Sir, I just want to also address a few matters that were raised in a previous speech. It's interesting. I've no doubt Senator Mezek is right that some members of the JLA, which I have no affiliation with, are indeed in favour of the licensing. I believe one of those people is very close relative of Senator Mezek's himself, which is probably why he knows that at least one member of the JLA is in favour of licensing. But yes, relying on a close relative to make that call is an interesting place to be. So with regard to consultation, there has, and we saw this when I was on the Environment Scrutiny Panel, sir, we saw that the Minister wasn't consulting properly. And indeed, I believe that after these, well, not regulations, but after Deputy Ward's proposition was that P20 was debated, sir, the JLA President or Chair wrote to the Minister asking to meet him, to speak with him, to find a way forward to help design these regulations. But that was denied by the Minister, a refusal to meet with them. I don't know why, but it's not something which can be called consultation. Senator Mezek also referred to a town hall meeting, one that was did take place in February 2020, and one that apparently indeed was called by the JLA itself. It wasn't called by the department. The Minister was there, he spoke briefly, and then his officers spoke about licensing. I believe Senator Mezek was there, but didn't stay for as long for the questions. And following that, there was a refusal consistently on the minister's part to meet with the JLA, because again, they wanted to get to the bottom of this issue and find a mutually happy way forward there. So there is no question that consultation on this hasn't been done appropriately by the minister. There's been a strange reticence by the minister to get involved with stakeholders. And in my view, speaking with stakeholders is the basis of being a minister. That's the very thing that every minister has to do. You have to hear the fors, you have to hear the against, you have to try and find that middle way forward. But that hasn't been happening in this case, sir. And I don't understand why. I just don't. So, sir, this is empire building. I can promise you that. 6 inspectors will become 7, 8, 9, 10. There's no question. This is more regulation, sir. There were other ways. We still don't understand why the rent safe scheme wasn't used as the basis of this scheme, sir. So now we have a rent safe scheme and a licensing scheme. I still don't understand why a register wasn't more carefully thought of by the minister. He just disregarded that out of hand. I believe that must be officers' advice, the very officers who are employing the 6 people to inspect this. Yeah, there hasn't been proper consultation. This will cost the states £1 million a year at a time when we know that money is going to be extremely tight going forward. And it just adds more layers of regulation. There is no question that people want safe housing for all islanders. That's absolutely correct. We have the minimum standards legislation that's in place. We can have some sort of inspection regime. There's no question. We can have a registration scheme. There's no question. But licensing takes it to a new level of intrusion into people's lives. And just one little thing I wanted to say, Senator Mezek referred to the JLA being 3% of landlords. Getting involved in such conversations is ridiculous, because how many tenants out of the many thousands and thousands of tenants are represented by the Jersey Tenants Forum? You can't start making those arguments in that way. Always these forums have a small kind of proportion of the actual full amount of people involved. In the same way that political parties represent a very tiny proportion of actual people, the members of a political party, number in their hundreds, yet there are 100,000 islanders. And so it's very difficult for political parties, if they were to look at purely their members and the numbers of their members, to say that they represent everybody. So there's a lot of strange arguments being put forward, but I ask members to think about the cost, the £1 million, think about the employment, the 6 people that will almost undoubtedly grow, the lack of consultation, the lack of engagement by the minister in taking this forward, and the constant wave upon wave of regulation that has been breaking on the shores of this island, sir. So they are good intentions, but Jersey cannot keep being pounded and becoming, one of the reasons we're becoming such an expensive place to live is because we keep wrapping ourselves in knots of regulation, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Martin.
Thank you, sir. And I speak as somebody who supported this absolutely 100% when it first came to the Assembly. And I've heard 3 speeches, and I think Deputy Morelli's covered a couple of points I wanted to, who I'd say have represented the proposition as how they think it is, and as actually not, and that was from the Minister and Senator Mezek. And I think the truth, sir, is somewhere in between. I was very concerned Senator Mezek talked about revenge evictions as if this was some sort of law, and I know myself and Senator Volvo made this point in the very first passing of this law. There's nothing that protects tenants. If a landlord thinks, unless something's changed, sir, and this is, I want the Minister to clarify this absolutely, I want protection for tenants. I want them to live in decent accommodation. And then at the woodwork, sir, as Deputy Morell has just said, minimum of £1 million to do this. And you know, and then you can claw back with fees. So I just think we're somewhere in between. As I say, I've supported this before. I'm now in the territory of where I'm really not sure. Am I helping tenants? Am I really, really helping tenants on this island? And I have to be 100% sure I don't make their case worse. I don't bring in a law where the landlord just presumes that they said, oh, I think I'm living in substandard and can evict them, and etc. etc. So I'll leave it there, sir. I think the minister needs to clear up some points about the money and the revenge evictions when he sums up on the principles. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Conatable St Helier.
Thank you, sir. And I find myself in a similar position to the minister who's just spoken. Like all States members, I've been lobbied a great deal by landlords, and I do have concerns on a number of areas which haven't perhaps been covered by previous speakers. I remember, sir, many years ago hearing, I think he was Minister of Economic Development at the time, former Senator McLean, standing up in the Assembly and saying that his mission as minister would be to reduce red tape. And I'm sure he would probably be the first to say now, if he was asked, that that was a mission that he did not succeed in. Perhaps it was a mission impossible. We really are, as Deputy Morell has said, drowning in red tape, and there is no sign of that getting any better today. I only have anecdotal evidence, but I do know some landlords who have several properties who are really quite despairing of the additional red tape that we're asking them to take on board, and some of them are considering leaving their properties empty simply because the hassle and the headache of complying with each new wave of requirements is putting them off actually doing this business, and that's not something we want to do at all. I noted in Senator Mesnick's speech he used I think a slightly emotive example of unsafe electrical installations, and I think the implication was that these might not be detected unless these regulations today go through. And I'm assuming that that isn't the case, because we do have a health and safety law, and as a previous speaker said, we have regulations as far as rental properties are concerned, which do mean that these outrageous and frankly dangerous practices, rare as they are, will not be able to happen, and they will be picked up under other provisions. A further point I wanted to make, sir, was that one of the most frequent calls I make upon this department as constable, and before that as deputy, is from residents whose lives are being made absolutely miserable by the noise of their neighbours. It is surely something that we have complaints about every day, whether it's the neighbours leaving the dog barking, or someone operating a semi-industrial business in their backyard which keeps the people awake. And I have on most occasions been disappointed by the response of the officers in terms of enforcement, in terms of reducing those noise nuisances. People have to jump through enormous hoops to do anything about the antisocial noise of their neighbours. And so I'm wondering why we are asking the same team to take on yet more work when, as far as I can see, they are struggling to do the work that we have tasked them to do in terms of making particularly urban areas, congested areas, high density areas, places where people really want to live. So I do have these queries, sir, and I look forward to hearing the Minister answering them when he sums up. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conatable. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir, and I apologise for any background noise. I have my window wide open. Now, obviously, that is a cue for everybody in the area to either build something or make their dog bark. So I do apologise in advance. So I want to remind members why we're here in this debate today. This Assembly voted in favour of bringing these amended regulations back to the Assembly, giving approval to the reworking and moving the situation forward when we voted on P20 on the 8th of June. But again, we face an onslaught from the same voices who will not accept the will of the Assembly and move forward. So this assembly has a terrible tendency of failing to make and act upon decisions. It has a vested interests around landlords, as shown by the declarations, that have been overcome once, and we've moved forward. But members will continue to look to intellectualise voting against this previously accepted proposition for what I see as a myriad of very confused reasons. And so I've made a note on some of them, and let's go through those. So there was this ventilation argument, absolute nonsense, sir. It's one of the red herrings when it comes to housing. And it is because we are unregulated that tenants have to put up with this. And then we get to the overregulation argument. Again, a red herring. What increases the costs is unregulated market that fails to protect tenants but consumes huge amounts of public money via a market of subsidies through income support, either for the entire amount of rent or because people working full-time can't afford the rents in these unsubsidized and unregulated homes. And what's the outcome of this? Are we going to say, well, you know what, we don't really need all these regulations, so let's forget the regulations around restaurants and cafes and bars and their health standards, because it's quite expensive to actually do something about those. So we have to keep inspecting them, and they have to keep going through a load of red tape. And in the end, they'll probably be okay. They're self-regulating. It's fine. So we know that's not the case. And what about our public buildings? Are we just going to leave them and say, oh, it doesn't matter if they're safe or not? It's okay. You come in, if you trip over a step, if there's no disability access, that's absolutely fine, because the red tape, we want to stop the red tape. So this is an intellectualizing of a mistake. And I really want people to look at what they're saying here. And it's very interesting that is the clamour to limit any regulation is when it comes to landlords. This area, the new posts in the target operating model around this area were created in the target operating model to maintain the housing standards for the regulations that were already voted for, the laws of the Rental Dwellings Act. So shall we just drop those regulations and say it really doesn't matter about what standards you rent your accommodation in? And in fact, so we should have a more Edwardian approach and say you should be pleased that you've got somewhere to go and keep your head dry. Is that what we're saying in this assembly? Because I think we need to think very carefully about the genuine implications of what we're saying here. And so this notion of the refusal to meet the JLA or whatever they're called, they have direct influence in government through their political representative, who is an assistant chief minister and indeed a member of the current new party of government. So there is lobbying that goes on continuously in the Council of Ministers, continuously in government on behalf of landlords. And the Landlords Association represents 3% of a group. So these arguments to say that people aren't being represented, you're absolutely right. That is not representative. And so the relationship between the tenant and the landlord is not one of equality. The power is with the landlord, who owns the place that person lives and can at any time give, I think it's 3 months to move out. It is very difficult for tenants to organise and get themselves into a group, given that many of them are working full time, all the hours under the sun, to give 30, 40, 50, 60% of their wage to a landlord. So these are not arguments that actually stand up to any real scrutiny as to their validity. They are smokescreens for one simple thing, which is that some people simply do not want to regulate housing because it will mean that people have to declare what they're actually renting out. So we spend millions of pounds on comms, but we are now saying, oh, well, £1 million, which is the deficit for that department to do what it needs to do, including public health standards. And we are desperately needing to maintain public health standards, as we've seen through the pandemic, people living in tiny, inappropriate homes. But so we're learning nothing from it. And every time we talk about building back better, or whatever phrase that will be used, as soon as we come to this move forward in the licensing of landlords so that we can know that we are maintaining standards, we step away from it again, and we come up with these old redundant arguments that are simply not relevant to what we're doing. And so the Constable of St Helier talking about people leaving their properties empty, another straw man argument. So why on earth would somebody who has somewhere leave it empty when that, for the sake of a form that needs to be filled in, if they're reaching a standard, and then throw away £1,000, £1,500, £2,000, £2,500, £3,000 a month, because that's the reality of the income from those properties, those homes that will be somebody's home that they will pay through the nose for. So that is a nonsense. I simply do not believe there is any evidence for that at all. In fact, when Senator Mezek made the point about the FOI that says there are more landlords every year, are we going to ignore real data from a Freedom of Information request and go with anecdotal data when it suits us? Because that's what we seem to be doing again in this argument, to simply put a barrier in front of something we've already voted for. And give people the opportunity to go away and say, well, I know why I voted against it this time, because there were reasons given to me. Look at those reasons, sir. This is the worst part of this assembly, and it keeps happening. And so this notion of noisy neighbours, well, we have rules around noisy neighbours. Implement them. And if the constable is saying, oh, we'll just get on with that and don't regulate everything, what he's saying to his parishioners, in the concentrated number of parishioners in St Helier, and I hope that the Constable of St Helier is not saying this to his parishioners. Look, just deal with the housing that you've got. Don't expect it to be regulated. Let's just hope for the best. And if you're in poor quality housing, make a complaint. And if you're worried about being moved out, well, that's your own fault. You're on your own. That is not what I would want for somebody who represents me in the Assembly. So I was wondering whether to just repeat the speech on the 8th of June, but I may have to talk about that should we get to the amendment. So I remind members of the following. Since taking over the inspection of lodging houses, for example, places that we do know about, just a couple of years ago, Environmental Health served 179 notices for failure to meet minimum standards, despite being hampered by COVID restrictions. They have unearthed many examples of landlords ripping off their tenants by overcharging for electricity and water. Any minister can, sir, and that is a very important point. When they are given the power to do it, they drive an improvement in standards. And so this license is for 5 years. This is a long-term process of improving standards. But unless we start, it will not happen. And we need to make a start. The notion from the Constable Umbrella that this is too quick, we have spent years discussing this. This is, I don't know what iteration of this regulation that we're talking about now, but it is certainly not quick. And for those people living in poor standard accommodation, it's certainly not quick enough. I'll make a couple of other points, sir. Any minister can impose fees at any time. This proposition means that they have to come to the Assembly to do so. And the 6-week part of the amendment, so I just talked to that briefly, is just to make sure that there's a lodging period for those changes that have to come to the Assembly. Please read it carefully and look at the implications of that. So a minister can change anything they want at any time, but they have to come to the Assembly. They could make GST 50%. They could make tax 0% for everybody and just write off public services and have that nature in tooth and claw. I don't know, I've just stolen one of the Alliance Party's policies. I hope I haven't. But they could do that at any time, sir. And that is the way this Assembly works. So there is nothing new here. And if we oppose those charges in the Assembly with a majority, and the majority seems to, you have the opportunity to oppose them. And I remind members that as they come for re-election, none of us can be sure that we will be, so you may not be here to have any influence in the future anyway. I really don't think that that is, again, an argument that stands up to scrutiny. So much of the documentation required and requested by tenants when they take out a tenancy is encapsulated in the 2018 minimum standards law. In fact, the Jersey Tenants Forum, and for the information that Jersey Tenants Forum did give, which is a remarkable amount of information, tenants recommend tenants to ask agents and landlords for the documents pertaining to boiler inspections, etc., to change the contract if it does not meet the 2018 legislation. So you're asking individuals to do this and take this into their own hands, and they should not have to be in that position. The Government of Jersey website already contains the information, as does the Citizens Advice website. Good landlords already meet these standards. There is no extra red tape for those who already meet legally required standards. So the potential costs of the government are not from this landlord scheme. this licensing scheme. It's about dealing with it's about the knock-on effect and the implications of poor quality housing for vulnerable children and for vulnerable elderly and all sections of our community that have to be then dealt with and picked up by the government. That's where the real costs come from. So we have to start down the path of regulating and standardising the quality of accommodation that is so eye-wateringly expensive in Jersey. We cannot just leave this to this supposed hope for the best approach and listen to these arguments which are simply, again, putting a smokescreen in front of what we need to do. So this assembly is about making decisions. And the reality is this: we have an unregulated housing sector. There are rules, but they are not enforced. To leave it to tenants is a mythology. They will not be able to take on their landlords in that way. So voting against this today means that you continue the acceptance of substandard housing, because that's just the way it is, and you shouldn't expect the government to do anything about it. So I do not believe that. I believe the government has a role, a duty, a moral duty to set standards of housing for its population and then enforce that with regulations. So this is not an onerous expense. It is something that will improve housing standards over the long time, improve the lives of people over the long time, improve the safety and the standard of living of members of our society over a long time. So to me, it's a no-brainer. We vote for this because that's what we were elected to do, to put people first on this island. Children and all sections of our communities should be protected in the homes that they live in. That is not happening at the moment, and I urge members not to renege on a previous decision and not to step backwards again, but to actually make a step forward and show the people of Jersey that we have their interests at heart in this assembly, not our self-interest at heart. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Southern.
Thank you, sir. And I'll be brief, because I've heard some spectacularly ridiculous arguments. We've had the anti-red tape brigade out in force, and the drowning in red tape. We're drowning in regulation. Nothing about Jersey could be further from the truth. We've got minimal standards across certainly the accommodation sector, and we've had that for a long time. But what I want to do is just speak to those who are attracted by the red tape bandwagon and feel they could get on that and at the same time justify their position. I don't believe that's possible, because I believe taking the ultimate step and saying I'm going to vote against this proposition, despite the fact it's been twice through the Assembly and accepted twice, but vote against that, and that would be a vote for unsafe accommodation. It would be a vote for unhealthy accommodation. Think about it. Do you wish to be seen to vote against this proposition and therefore allowing unhealthy and unsafe accommodation? If you're prepared to do that, then by all means vote against this, but be prepared to justify it in a very short time, and that is the decision you're making today. So please vote for this proposition and vote against unhealthy, unsafe accommodation. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Senator Ferguson.
Thank you, sir. You know, this cry that we don't know what's being rented out, we have parish rates, and every single property in the parish is registered, and if it's let out, then there's an occupier's and a foncier's rate. Yes, it can on occasions make sense to leave property empty where the increase in the capital value is higher than the total rental. You know, including the utility costs. What about the cost of servicing equipment, etc.? Decorating, gardening. Surely the landlord's entitled to, you know, claim that expense. You know, when I was living in New York, we had flats where the rent was controlled and not allowed to be increased. The problem was that when the control was released, rents of the controlled flats skyrocketed. An interesting economic phenomenon. We need a rental tribunal, certainly, where tenants concerned about rental levels, health concerns, and mold, etc., can appeal. But it should be open to both tenants and landlords, so that on the one hand of the tenants we can prevent Rachman type operations, and the tenants can cope with unruly the landlords rather, I'm sorry, can cope with unruly tenants. We've got to remember that the states are the market leader landlord. You know, we told Andrew Green this years back. Unfortunately, the tenants will also feel their rent will be reduced. Environmental health and safety regrettably do sometimes overestimate the work that's required, and which, as Deputy Morell said, the cost of which will eventually fall on the tenant. One must also remember the comment made in, I think, 1900, 120 years ago. It is a further infringement of human rights. But the quote was, when a new source of taxation is found, it never means in practice that the old source is abandoned. It merely means that the politicians have two ways of milking the taxpayer where they only had one before. I'm sorry, I really can't go along with this proposition, this amendment, so I should be voting against all of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? I call upon the Minister to reply.
Thank you, sir. I apologise, I've got a fan on. If it's making too much noise, I'll turn it off, sir. I don't know if it's causing inconvenience, but I'm not hearing that from you as a problem. But first of all, thank the members that have spoken. I think the key points have come out in the debate. I think my starting point is to say, throughout my working life, I have been used to, for many, many years, having to deal with difficult problems where there are strongly opposing different views. And sometimes, in fact, thankfully, one is able to find compromises and pragmatic solutions. And I think over my working life in my various roles, I've been able to do that where it is possible. But I've equally learned to recognise that on some occasions that is not so. Is that you are going to have, there will be situations that are sharply differences of opinion with what is, I think, irreconcilability, which I think is the case here. Valued views on both sides equally have pluses and minuses, and
you froze a Minister. We can't. You lost your picture.
Seems to be my system.
Right. We can
Yes,
hear.
would you like me to turn my camera off?
Possibly there might be a few things. Yes.
Okay, do that, sir. So yes, so throughout my life, working life, I've covered the fact that there are situations that arise which are irreconcilable, and unfortunately, this is one. And certainly throughout the 3 years that I've been working on this, I've certainly made attempts to find that situation where it is possible within the law that has been created. The law is quite clear. The law that the states approved allows or gives an empowerment of a licensing system. And so those that argue against that are effectively arguing against an existing law, primary law. And that is something which I think is where the element of irreconcilability comes. And of course, I better declare I'm not in any political party in Jersey. I've obviously got my political views, but in Jersey, I've not aligned myself with any one group. I try and find ways of working in our old-fashioned system. Obviously, now we're fast changing that. I can already hear from the few speeches that we've had, very good speeches, but nonetheless give perhaps a shade of things to come about small government. Regulation is bad. Criticism, public sector workers who try and do their best to achieve things within the very, very limited resources they've got. Those are things which I personally try and not to get on board with. Now, obviously, just picking up the detail now, Constable St. Bernard, and again, thanks to Conitard for his kind comments about me, and I also agree with the same with him. He is a nice chap, and I work well together. But I really find that his using the situation that he knows full well, as Deputy Morell did, about the problems that I've got on planning enforcement resources, where we have a situation which I think is partly COVID, very substantially due to the target operating model reorganisation, where we have had major disruption, losing key staff, and we have got to deal with that. And of course, we've had to make priority decisions to do that, but to use that as a reason why we shouldn't have these regulations seems to be, frankly, a distortion. The team that Environmental Health have built up they've been built up not by extra staff, because they've lost staff. IHE has lost staff. So, Deputy Morell, it is not true that that team, it has lost staff. And what they've done is they've reallocated people around. But environmental health people are environmental health qualified. They're trained, experienced. They're not planning enforcers. So the idea that you can have some kind of generic red tape enforcer that can just move from one area to another, and it's illusory. That team needed to be built up because of the state's commitment to environmental health, and I have seen the importance of the environmental health team over my time, and particularly during COVID, where they have had enormous problems to deal with, and I'll come to those when I get to Constable St. Helier's comments. There are real issues to do with nuisances and so on. But anyway, so I think it's wrong making the link, conflating the issue. Well, we can't have regulations because we've got problems in other areas, and therefore environmental health people, which are housing experts, can suddenly go and do other things. I think that is not a fair statement. Now, I do agree one thing. I think that there is a need to have further analysis of the problem properties. And this is where I believe that if the regulations are approved, we will get a lot of extra information. We will find out a lot more about our housing stock, about the condition of it, where it is in its use, as I said. And that will help those kind of analyses in. Now, sweeteners. Yes, I confess. Now, I did meet the Jersey landlords. I sat on the platform at the meeting in the town hall, when officers of environmental health gave a presentation. Incidentally, I'm sure people may not have forgotten that the officer who was leading that presentation has been the stalwart of the COVID track and trace system and throughout. And we owe that officer a great debt of gratitude. And so any suggestion that somehow or other this was, we did not respond. We were invited to go there, and of course we had the presentation from the Assistant Chief Minister, who was leading the charge against regulation. And of course it became quite clear at that meeting that there was starkly disagreed views. Now, I took away commitments from that meeting, commitments that I said I accepted, that the scheme that was originally presented in 2019 was too complicated, needed to be stripped out, simplified. The conditions need to be drastically revised. They were. I uncomplicated that system. I gave a commitment that on my watch there would be no charges. What's the solution to get the costs they were complaining about? Cut it out, no fees. So I'm quite clear that I met the commitment and the undertakings I made to that meeting on that day, way back before we had COVID. It seems like an age away now. And of course, yes, it is true. I've not been able to have physical meetings in a normal course of events. I would have done. But, you know, here am I, 75 next month, double vaxxed. Yeah, we got, you know, how many, you know, are we going to all meet in large gatherings? No, we're not. We can't even meet as a group of states members. So I've been reticent about those physical meetings. I've always offered virtual meetings, but consultation is not negotiation. The approach made to me by the Jersey landlord is that here's an alternative scheme, an alternative plan. In other words, we want to talk to you about you doing an alternative. Now, I did not think that was within the mandate of the law, because I've explained the law says licensing, nor is it within the mandate of the state's decisions that have been made. And so I've had to do what my duty is to bring this to the point where the highest authority in our island community, the State's Assembly, to make that decision. And I'm grateful for the opportunity today to be able to clear that up. So I dealt with the issue of reluctance to meet. Delay the debate. Yes, I had that request. Could I just ask members to reflect? To delay the debate, what for? I've had the scrutiny report. I've done the reply. There is nothing in my opinion, the new scrutiny comments that haven't addressed in my reply. There's reluctant to waste members' time by going through them, but they've all been answered. The only point about the delay being requested is to have a round with unilateral discussions with the Jersey Landlords Association. People I respect, I absolutely respect their views, but they conflict with states' decisions and they conflict with the law as passed. And what I suggested is that we can adapt. We will learn from the implementation of these arrangements if states approve them, and they can be refined and revised in the light of that knowledge as the future years by a future minister, which won't be me. Now, a couple of things also mentioned. This notion, and I think it is scaremongering. Landlords selling properties because of the licensing scheme. There may be some of people that have the anxieties of poorer condition properties, yes, but equally I think the trend is very much the other way. We're getting a constant growth of buy-to-lets, new properties coming on, and I think it's better if that means there's a change in the nature of the market. That is better, and I don't think there's any evidence. Now, one of the quotes when I've asked about this, I was told, so many lodging houses were sold. I say, well, what's happening to those lodging houses? They're going into proper flats, meeting proper standards. So I say, well, why isn't that good? Why isn't that a good thing? If we have lodging houses in properties which aren't meeting, they're much more older properties, generally more difficult to adapt. Why isn't it good that they go into flat space, more amenities and better standards? What's wrong with that? And so I think, you know, and then I get the answer I got back from the Assistant Chief Minister. We need these. Where are the people that don't have, where are people with unregistered accommodation going to go if they can't go in these substandard lodging houses? Well, sorry, no, that says that we have to sort that part of the system out. But it starts with having, as I think speakers have said, step on the road towards those better standards. It's not going to come overnight. 5 years was a good change. The scrutiny panel always wanted 5 years. I've accepted that. The scrutiny panel always wanted low costs. They've got no costs. The scrutiny panel wanted simplification. We got that. So, and the states have approved it, of course. So then, of course, what we got this situation, well, we don't trust future ministers because they may bring in fees. Look, I need to clear up so many distortions here. I inherited a situation where there was no financial budget for the salaries of environmental health whatsoever in the IHE budget. That team have been a financial deficit from day one. Day one. Because assumptions were made by previous council ministers that fees of £1 million would be generated. That was their assumption. It was a corporate assumption imposed. Not all that £1 million was made up of housing regulation costs. The figures I've given in the report, I just can't find it at the moment, it's around about £625,000, I think, is the actual housing inspection cost. That's the current costs they're incurring on that work, and that will not increase. The resource will not, there'll be no more new resources in that, as I've said all along. And the rest of it was, there was an assumption, and listen to this, restaurateurs and runners of pubs, we were going to then charge the rest £300,000 to the restaurants. And I say, when this is discussed across the minister around the corporate star change of the meetings, are we really going to have fees imposed on restaurants after everything they've gone through these last 2 or 3 years for inspection? Or perhaps we should say, no, we don't know. We don't have to have health inspection at the restaurants anymore. It's not important. You know, let food poisoning run. Absolutely not. We've got a good system of regulation there for food standards. We need to do more as a result of the Brexit rules we've now signed up to, things to do with food safety and allergies and things like that, which the work team are working on. But imposing fees, no. And those that say this £1 million liability, it's got, you know, it should never, that cut should have never been made in the budget. And so there is a bid to put that back, which is in the government plan. And that would allow a new minister to be absolutely uncluttered with any past baggage on this question of cost and make a judgment, as was said, what is equitable. And we'll have much more information about that. And what's number one important here is the issue of standards and achieving those standards and progressive achieving them. Now, I'm probably going on for too long. I think thanks Deputy Mezek for all his comments. He reminded us very strongly about health and safety. And of course, he is right. I believe this is a light touch. And I know the team are outstanding. Do you know what? When I learned that the Environment Health Department had been moved to the Environment Ministry, I was so pleased. This took place in Deputy Lucy's, Deputy St Martin's reign, as it were. And I was really pleased that he took that on. And when I took it on, I was so proud, because I thought that environmental health would be safer and more likely to get priority for resources within the environmental sector than it was within the health. Now, that's because I'm not denigrating health, but if you're faced with a choice between keeping people alive and your health treatments and all the expectations and dealing with the environmental issues about the way they live, I'm afraid the record is the priority will always go to the clinical work and keeping people alive. Whereas I thought with environment, then there will be a more enlightened attitude, recognizing that in a small island with a very dense population, we all live on top of each other, and environmental health issues were critical to our well-being of our community. And this is part of it. And I'm really hopeful that members will see that, and on that question and try and get that budget restored. So that should take out this issue of this distortion of cost. So any suggestion, I'm sorry, Deputy Morell, £1 million this cost this scheme? No, it is not. And of course, I do look at, when I look at Deputy Morell, I'm delighted to have him as an Assistant Minister of Economic Development. And I look at their budgets, eye-watering sums, eye-watering. And I think myself, well, where's the priorities? Are we being argued? Well, no, this is an area for cuts. And, you know, the notion that he said about arrogance of translating a state's decision to have a law into practice was really not right. Now, planning breaches, things are serious, yes. And I'm desperate to get that staff on the planning side. But diverting people away from environmental health, those 6 people that are looking after environmental health of our community, is that the right thing? No, absolutely not. Now, I've dealt with the issue, I think, of consultation, how I've tried to respond to people. Empire building, really? No, rent safe. Look, that's been a success. It's carrying on. But we simplified. It used to be all very complicated before. That's simple now. It's a voluntary scheme, and that enables, I think, it's a promotion thing, a bit like food safe, things like that, based around those ideas. They work. What? The notion that this is an intrusion into life, really, I think, is too much. Now, let's Deputy Martin specifically. I thank Deputy Martin. I always value so much. I remember. Value all members, Deputy Martin particularly, because she so ably focuses on key points. Clarity. Now, clarification of the £1 million. The position as I believe it is that there is a bid in the government plan to correct it was a mistake. The assumptions made by previous governments were false. What I have here with the proposal is that there will be an implementation with no fees at day 1, and the no fees will not, it will mean that people who register under the grandfathering will not pay fees for 5 years. But of course, it is open to a new minister to introduce charges for new properties that come on, because there will be a total. We don't know what that percentage is. I might guess it might be around 10% a year. But the new minister then, in the light of the knowledge about the workload, the number of properties, they can then consider that matter. And in the amendment I brought, bring that forward to the states before any decision to adjust those fees can be introduced. So there's a safeguard there. Safeguard. So Deputy Martin is worried, and if I thought that bringing this regulation would damage the opportunity for rented homes in this island, I wouldn't be supporting it if I thought that. And I'm criticised because I rely on our civil servants, but these are people who've spent their life in this area. They've been on, of course, they know the experiences, they know the community. They're constantly in touch with people who deal with complaints all the time on a daily basis. So I have to rely on that. And I think we do need to do that. Now, eviction. Can evict? Well, look, I cannot believe that that if problems are to arrive on a license, on a property over a license, the team have assured me that there will be no heavy-handed here. Putting a property into a situation that it's not possible to be occupied by a tenant anymore is a very, very last in extremis resort, and would, in my view, almost certainly hardly ever happen. The procedures are there in the law to serve notices of things that need to be right and make corrections, and time to get things done, because it's difficult to get building work, we know that. And so I can't see, you know, we're going to have a situation with a heavy hand. This is a light touch. Now, I'm not an expert in this. I think what Deputy Martin is speaking about is if this situation, which I have to accept at face value, that if people complain, some people at the moment can end up either having their leases not extended or ended. I think this situation is the likelihood of that happening is reduced now under this arrangement. Constable St Helier spoke about the big problems in urban areas to do with noise nuisance. Yes, absolutely, Connetab. I get lots of complaints, and the problem is that the environmental health team do not have the law in place. They don't have the law to deal with the nuisance law. I've been advised is not fit for purpose. Not fit for purpose. It needs rewriting, needs a review, desperately so. I haven't got the resources. I've got bids in for the government plan for resources to do that development work in the future, and that I think I'd hope we don't end up in the same place, or at least a future minister doesn't, that we get a new law in, and then when it try to put it into place, then people then get cold feet, I suppose, the honest truth of it. Deputy Ward, thank you for your support. I'm sorry, I'm probably running out now. And Senator Ferguson. Senator Ferguson, please. This is nothing to do with rent tribunals. We are not regulating rent levels. We're having a system of licensing to check that properties are the minimum standards, and that's all. It doesn't go beyond that. So I think, sir, I've probably gone on too long. I will put it to the Assembly, and whatever the vote is, obviously we will, all of us, respect that and work within where we end up. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. In a moment, the greffier will add a vote into the chat channel of the meeting. He has done so. The vote is now open, and I ask members to cast their votes on the principles. If all members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. In the link, there are 20 votes pour and 21 votes contra. In the chat, there was 1 vote pour, making a total of 22 votes pour, and there were 2 votes contra in the chat, making a total of 23 votes contra in the chat, and accordingly the principles have been rejected. And
So
the
can I just have the score again, please? I didn't quite catch that because I lost my screen.
And
Yes.
can we have them read out both ways, please, sir? The 22 and the 23.
Yes, the
Please, thank you.
total of 20 votes, 22 votes pour, 21 in the link and 1 in the chat, and a total of 23 votes contra, 21 on the link and 2 in the chat. Was there a call for the
Yes, sir. Can we have all of the conch and all of the pour, please? Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Those members who voted pour: Deputy Labby, Deputy Young, Senator Valois, Deputy Tadier, Deputy Wickenden, Deputy Higgins, Deputy Ward, the Constable of St Helier, Senator Mezek, Constable of St John, Senator Pallett, Deputy Martin, Deputy Alves, the Constable of St Lawrence, Deputy Pamplin, Deputy Gardner, Deputy Southern, Deputy of St Juan, Constable of St Martin, Deputy Lewis, the Deputy of St John, and in the chat, the Constable of St Mary. Those who voted contre were the Constable of Grouville, Deputy Lahegre, Deputy Guida, Constable of St Juan, Senator Farnham, Constable of St Brelard, Deputy IA, Deputy Pinnell, Senator Lafondre, Deputy Truscott, the Deputy of St Peter, Senator Ferguson, Senator Gorst, Deputy of St Mary, Deputy of St Martin, the Constable of Trinity, the Deputy of Trinity, Deputy Morel, Deputy Ash, Deputy of Grouville, Deputy Masson, as well as the Constable of St Saviour and Senator Moore.
Accordingly, the proposition is taken to have been withdrawn under the relevant standing order. The next item is allocation of the former States Jesuit Police Headquarters site to Rouge-Bouillon School, lodged by Deputy Gardner. For the purposes of this debate, the main responder is the Minister for Children and Education. And I ask the greffier to read the citation.
States are asked to decide whether they have opinion to agree that the former States of Jersey Police Headquarters site should be allocated for the expansion of Rouge-Bouillon Primary School and for the provision of community spaces, and to request the Council of Ministers to take the necessary steps, including the incorporation of this project within the Government Plan 2022-2025.
Now, there is an amendment by the Minister for Children and Education, and there is an amendment to that amendment from Deputy Gardner. Minister for Children and Education, are you minded to accept the amendment to your amendment?
Because of the late lodging period, I haven't had a chance to speak to the Council of Ministers to get a overall view. I believe the amendment to the amendment in that fact should not be accepted by me, and we should have the debate to allow the proper democratic process to follow for the Council of Ministers and the rest of the Assembly, sir.
Thank you. Yes, Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And I understand that the Council of Ministers wouldn't like to accept my amendment. And yes, we will start a conversation now and let's democratic process to proceed.
Yes.
In any negotiations, there comes a time when you have to draw a line. When you have to make it clear how important something is to you. And when the other side in the negotiation does not appreciate how important this particular issue is for you, you have to make it clear. And this is where I'm finding myself. When enough time has passed, enough promises have been made and broken, assurances have been false, and no evidence of the other side taking an education infrastructural needs of the children of St. Helier seriously. Rouge-Bouillon School has been in need of renovation and improvement for 30-odd years. In these 30 years past, the island politicians have repeatedly postponed making any solid commitments. Head teacher Rouge-Bouillon wrote to the Public Accounts Committee in 2020. We have a fantastic staff and wonderful children, and we do the very best we can with the circumstances we have. But surely it's not right that the children most in need of space to run about and play sport go to school with no playing field or green space. We have specialist unit for children with autism and communication difficulties, but not a single space for parents to park in order to bring these highly needed children into school and enabling parents to meet staff. We are a school that burned down about 30 years ago. There are people who are now grandparents who, whilst dropping off their grandchildren at Rouge-Bouillon, could recognize the same lack of facilities as when they weren't there. They would probably recognize the same hollow promises and assurance of a better future for the state of the primary schools in St. Helier. For years, St. Helier deputies and even the constable have come to the assembly to ask for a better deal for St. Helier primary schools and have been assured that promised better schools sometime in the future. Well, I call it, this is the future we were talking about years ago. I found questions and responses dated to 2015 requesting to allocate former police site to the school or to the fire station, recognizing the need, promising a solution, recommending a course of study, and since then, nothing. The outdoor space, lack of playing field, and green areas limit the opportunity for the pupil to learn outdoor, to exercise, to be socialized, and to play. The current state of the building is no way shows pupils their value. Already back in 1980s, research found the mainly correlation evidence to a relationship between equality of school environment and student outcomes, where those in poorer environments tend to have poor attitudes and behaviors as well as lower attention. It's clear the good school building were crucial and outside facilities are crucial for improving children's learning and behavior. There is an opportunity to improve the whole learning experience by the school by providing new updated facilities to assist pupil development and attainment. As equally the opportunity for school to become a community hub, allowing additional extracurricular activities for pupils and the family and the community at large. The school that will share resources with the community would benefit in this area of St. Helier, as there are currently limited options for pupils, staff, parents, family to congregate in a community serving way. Now, since lodging my proposition, I've had meetings with several stakeholders, and this was the reason that we have now 2 amendments in front of us today. Actually, my communication with the current Minister for Education started almost a month ago when I suggested to look strategically. So the main debate will be between these 2 amendments and if the state is ready to make strategic decisions. So I'm moving this proposition and I will extend when I will open a speech to my amendment.
Hello. We've lost you, Deputy Gardner. Oh, that completes your speech. Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
We now come to the amendment of the Minister, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
1 page 2 paragraph A, after the word spaces, insert the words unless an alternative site can be identified and allocated for the provision of a modern standard primary school in St Helier. And after the word incorporation, substitute the word the with the word this, and after the word project, insert the word fundum. 2 page 2 paragraph B, designate the existing paragraph as paragraph A, and after this paragraph, insert the following new paragraph B. That no site in government ownership that is suitable for a modern standard primary school in St Helier should be allocated for another purpose until the action envisaged in Part A to identify a site and include project funding in the Government Plan 2022-25 has been completed.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to first thank Deputy Gardner for bringing this proposition, this positive discussion. Unfortunately, I was unable to support the original proposition as it was an instruction. I think what we needed, and I had some very, very constructive conversations with Deputy Gardner about this proposition, which I do support. I do think that if we do need new schools within St Helier and St Saviour, let's talk about the Town Bowl. This proposition as amended, working with Deputy Gardner, whose idea it was to amend, will give surety that this site will be used for the school if we cannot find a better solution for the town centre. The only reason I haven't taken the amendment to the amendment as amended is because I haven't had a chance to speak to any other ministers around it, and I thought that would be unfair, but I do support it. I do believe that we need to make sure we've got 2 new fit for purpose modern 2 form-entry schools, or maybe a 3 form-entry, but we need to do that work. That work is ongoing, so we'll be supporting the amendment to the amendment, but I can't force that decision on our Council of Minister members, sir. So I think what I would say, sir, is this amendment will just give the surety that the site will not be used for anything else while we continue doing work on what is required and where the need is for new schools in St Helier. Thank you, sir.
Is amendment seconded?
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. There is an amendment to the amendment lodged by Deputy Gardner, and I ask the greffier to read that amendment.
1 page 2 part 1, after the word alternative site for the words can be, substitute the word is. 2 page 2 part 2, A, replace the word government with the word states. B, after the word St Helier, insert the words and St Saviour. And C, for all the words after the word until, substitute the words the strategic review of the education estate of St Helier and St Saviour is completed, and sites are allocated and approved for modern standard primary schools according to the educational needs of these parishes.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And I'm pleased to follow the minister. And I'm pleased to hear that he would be supporting this amendment, because this amendment to the amendment brings the vital element of strategic infrastructure thinking for the future. We have published an estate management strategy, which was never debated in the States Assembly. It doesn't give an overall clarity on how we will manage our strategic priorities. This is an opportunity for us, States members, to clarify the element of the strategic plan and show their members' views and their own priorities for education or other infrastructure needs. Each member has an opportunity to reveal if they buy into the putting children first government slogan, or they're just hiding behind these words whilst having a completely different agenda. Part A, it's really minor amendment. I can see why we need the flexibility, and we have good discussion with the minister. I have met the ambulance and fire station. I'm not completely convinced this is the only space where it can build. At the same time, I do recognize the need of the new fire and ambulance station. I have several question marks about the scope of the feasibility study, but I'll put it aside. Anyway, it can be a flexibility as long as this site, the Rouge Bouillon site, is protected. And if we'll not find other suitable sites for primary schools in St. Helier, these sites will not go. So my amendment is unless is identified. So it's more to changing wording to be more certainty. The different views, it comes to the part B. We live on the small island. I cannot see that there would be any new discoveries in relation to any new sites or development as a result of the ongoing review of the education or any other in state. This is what we have. Nothing new will come. We know that there are always competing priorities. A number of serious contenders on alternative sites of the primary schools in St. Helier and St. Saviour is really not high. The criteria for such a site must include sufficient outdoor space and space for sport facilities, in addition to fit-for-purpose school buildings. A quick look at Google Maps and anyone can identify all the land that we have available. And we have already situation when in 2015, Deputy Dubley raised the question, would the former police site will be allocated to school or to a fire and ambulance station, and it's gone into housing. We do need housing, but this size of the site, if we would decide that time that we can need fire and ambulance station that could go on that site, and we could have a new school at current site, and probably John Green and Springfield school sites will be available for building, will be in much better place. But it was 6 years ago, and nothing happened since that. We would have houses, but we will not have a school where these children can go. Education sites that lack of outdoor space, lack of sport facilities, and have outdated building schools such as Rouge Bouillon, Springfield, St. Luke's. Looking at the school estate in St. Helier, highlighted also those schools that on the boundaries of the parishes, schools what we call in urban bulk in urban areas, and used by St. Helier and St. Saviour, and all of them needs really proper outdoor space and better facilities. So this was the reason that I have included St. Saviour in the consideration for the strategic view, as it's between two of these parishes in these areas. I do feel that it is really important to expand strategic vision for the education estate for St. Helier and St. Helen joint up approach, because we probably need 2-3 form entry, north and south, or 3 form entry schools, or any other configuration. And I will leave this configuration to the government. Here in the States, we're about to make strategic decision and which direction we would like to go. The repurposing of the site of the former States of Jersey Police headquarters at Rouge Bouillon has been subject for the question. We talked about it, and we really need to move forward. We don't need to close street or traffic to let St. Luke's children play. We need to have proper playground. As the minister indicated in his report, the review of town primary school estate is nearly completion. The importance of the outcome of this review cannot be understated, and this will inform decision which needs to be made in respect of feasibility of school extension, new school.
The amendment.
Sorry?
Forgive me, no, please, Carol, I'm just talking
No,
to
yeah, it is about the amendment. So basically what I'm saying, the review is on the way. We've been told that review will be ready in 4-6 weeks back in May. I calculated we should see the review results in mid-June. Now we're mid-July, but I assume the review is coming out. So the moment that we have this review, we can make strategic decision. So basically what this amendment does, it's draw a line. I say no allocation of any state-owned site in St. Helier or St. Saviour to anything else until we have sorted our primary schools estate. If we don't have site, we have to decide what site can be purchased. I hope this will focus the government on the task. The compounded problem of St. Helier is getting new family homes, hundreds of new family homes. We can expect hundreds of couples to start families in these new homes. The education infrastructure of St. Helier and St. Xavier is stuck in the past and completely unprepared for the next 10 years or so. St. Helier has a primary school education underclass. Geographical location has become an accurate predictor of the school facilities, child reading abilities, and school grades. So we are in the educational crisis in St. Helier, and it's not a secret. Everything that I have stated is in the public domain. Everyone knows St. Helier is having educational crisis to start in primary school, and we need to do something now. Ensure the allocation of the site, secure the space that's necessary to deliver adequate facilities, and bringing across concrete plans together for a modern educational estate for St. Helier and St. Xavier. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Well, I kind of wish that Deputy Gardner's speech wasn't so disparaging about the good work that's been going on in education. We started the school site review many months ago, and the Deputy is correct. We were hoping to get it out sooner, but we want to make sure we do a thorough piece of work. This is not just about what sites could site a school. It's about where the need is. It's about where are the children living in the bowl of town. Is it up closer to Havre de Pars? Is it around near Rouge Bouillon? Where's the need actually required, and what does that need look like, and how many different form entries, or 1 or 2, or what would that look like, and what was the future look like? We need to make sure we're doing that piece of work. And the Deputy's speech made it sound like we had just been sat on our hands, sir, and that's nothing could be further from the truth. Education department and sites have been working tirelessly to try and improve educational outcomes and educational funding, and it all started with the great work that Senator Valois did when she started as Education Minister with the Education Reform Code programme, which is putting extra money into schools to try and stop the deficit that we're seeing in education for special education's need for English additional language. The Infrastructure Minister, Deputy Lewis, made a promise that nothing would happen on the Rouge Bouillon site until all of the reviews, whether it be for school or housing or fire and ambulance station, have been completed, and that the Assembly could make that decision. So in a lot of ways, as much as I appreciate this proposition being put forward, and I will be supporting it, it wasn't as necessary as the Deputy makes out to be, but it is good. I'm glad we have this proposition, because it gives us a level of surety that nothing will happen on this site, because the Assembly is now hopefully going to ratify it, sir. So I will be supporting the fact that there needs to be 2 in this. It'll be up to each member and each to decide whether they want to shore up 1 site for schools or 2 sites for schools. I certainly think that we need 2, and that's the long-term vision. But how long it will be where we'll hold a site before we can get the funding in the government plan for 2 schools is probably a long way. But in any instance, as Education Minister, I will not vote against something that's better for the children in educational outcomes for this island, sir. So I will support it, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. I think this is well intentioned, but I'm anxious about the second part of this later amendment, because it is it sets a very high bar, if you like, on when any site in government ownership can be allocated for any use. And of course, whilst in an ideal world that is very desirable, because education, there's no question, all the things that are being said and the intention of the proposition and the minister's position is absolutely, totally not just valid, but vital. But it says that effectively that any other government sites that shouldn't be allocated for any other purpose, not only about the strategic review, and I've got confidence that strategic review will be completed, but then it says sites are allocated and approved, not just for a school, but according to modern standard educational needs, and who knows what it is. So there's a lot of work to do there. And my worry is that could be, if that was interpreted in a way onerously, it could be a bar to making our decisions on housing sites in towns, because we have desperately got to produce a good supply of affordable homes from our state-owned sites as part of our strategy in the draft island plan. And this, I think, could be an unintentional, this amendment to the amendment could be an unintentional bar to us doing that, which would be, but equally I absolutely agree that I think we have to find a new site for I think Rouge-Brion School. I don't favour the development of Rouge-Brion on the current site because of the environmental damage to air pollution and to children. I think the headquarters, the police headquarters, is absolutely right. Sorry, that be allocated for fire service should be there, and we need to find a new site. I've got my own preference for that site, but I'll agree to wait for the strategic review of the sites. But because I've got confidence in the ministers, infrastructure minister and the education minister to do that, because I've made the point that it needs to be done, because these questions are going to arise anyway in the public inquiry for the island plan. And so that is the timescale that I'm looking for. But as far as translating that into more detail, allocating the sites and approved, that is, I think, further on. And as the minister told us, you know, it depends on government plan, monies and all the rest of it. So I'd like the proposer to, you know, assure me on that, or to what's the intention of the words in this this amendment. So what the proposer considers the effect would be, and reassure me on that point. I look forward to hearing from the proposer. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Senator Ferguson.
We gave we promised the Sea Cadets that we would find them a permanent home. Now, at the moment, they're living on the first floor of the police station. Or in the police station. At the same time, I agree with Deputy Young because of the fumes of the roundabout and the fumes from and the pollution from Rouge-Brion. Where do the Sea Cadets, for instance, come in the great, you know, the great and glorious plan for the education review? And, you know, have either of the deputies who are coming up with these plans actually thought about this? The Sea Cadets are, you know, are actually waiting, as they have been for, what, 27 years, to get their permanent home. So, you know, where do they come into it? And they are really genuinely doing something good for the children of the island. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Conataba St. 1.
Thank you, sir. My question is simple, and I have studied both propositions fairly carefully. I've got two questions, really, which I'm hoping somebody's going to be able to answer. Firstly, whilst on the face of it, the Rouge-Brion site seemed large, it would be helpful if somebody could clarify whether it is actually going to be enough space for Rouge-Brion School, and the size and area of the site is big enough to accommodate playing fields and all the other things they want to do? I assume the answer is yes, but I think it'd be helpful to have that clarified before we vote on this. And secondly, my concern is about the fire service. This proposition, and we all seem to be talking about the fact that we found an alternative suitable site for the fire service, and that's where my concern lies. The fire service is located where it is for a very good reason. It has excellent access to all routes out of the island. It's very central. You can get to the east, you can get to the west, and you can get north from where they are with a considerable amount of speed and ease, assuming that traffic moves out the way when the blue lights and sirens go on. My own assertion is that finding an alternative site that is as good as this is going to be tricky. I'm racking my brains thinking where we could put the fire service. I'm not entirely sure that I can come up with a solution. So I would hope that somebody, before we vote on this, is able to give me the assurance that until such time as we've found a suitable site for the fire service, which meets their needs and protects the safety of all islanders. But let's not forget that fire service is a vital blue light service that we all rely on when there's an emergency, and we need to make sure that whatever site is allocated to them is as efficient as the current site. So I would look for somebody to provide some assurance to members that, that this will not happen, as worthy as it is, before we have relocated the fire service in a site that is entirely suitable for their needs. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Amitabh. Does any member speak on the amendment to the amendment? Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. Can you actually hear me? Because I've put some earphones in to try and cut down some of the background noise.
Yes, we can hear you.
That's fine. So I would fully support this, but there is an issue that I need to raise. In a public hearing with the Home Affairs Minister last week, we raised the question of Rouge Bouillon, and it was said, and I think, forgive me if I haven't got the word precisely, because I cannot find the Hansard. It was either said that the site of Rouge Bouillon for police and ambulance repositioning was sacred or sacrosanct, one of those, something like that. And so therefore, it's absolutely defined already that that would be used in that way. And I think the problem is this: we have one minister in government saying it will absolutely be used for fire and ambulance. Another minister saying he would accept an amendment, which means it won't be used for that, or even long term, it will just be a token gesture towards saying, yes, it will be accepted, but we know in the long term it won't be accepted for that. So we need to know where we are with clarity from the government, particularly as the two members are founder members of the government party. So we need to have some consistency in what's happening here. So if we're doing it genuinely for our children first, we need to allocate sites like this for a school. We need to allocate other sites in the town for school. I mentioned the waterfront development again, where there will be up to 600 children living there and no school planned in. And what I would suggest is that the Environment Minister changes the regulations for all of these planning estates and developments to say that there must be account of where these children can go to school, because at the moment that is not even considered. In the rush for cash, in the rush for a quick profit, that is lost completely. And yet again, we then are left to a well-meaning and well-done to Deputy Gardner bringing this proposition that tries to allocate a site, goes through numerous amendments and amendments of amendments, amendments of amendments of amendments, where what we end up with is a decision that's already been made. We want some transparency. So perhaps someone from the government can come and decide and let the Assembly know right now whether they have decided that this would already go to the police and fire and ambulance. And if so, why are we debating this?
Deputy
I'm
Ward,
quite happy to answer a piece of clarification.
yes, you're prepared to give way. Senator Farnham, your point of clarification of Deputy Ward.
Yes, sir. I think I heard Deputy Ward refer to the government party, and I wondered if he could just explain what he meant by that, please.
Yes, sir, of course. The Alliance Party has a number of members who are in government. Two of the ministers involved in the battle over this site are, for examples of that, the Chief Minister, I believe, the Social Security Minister, and a number of Assistant Chief Ministers. So I believe that they are the government that are very influential. The party that are very influential in government. I assume that Senator Farnham is not part of that party, but that's something he has to deal with in the Council of Ministers. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I would just
well, if you want to make a speech later on, you can on this issue.
Is it
But,
appropriate to refer to it?
Clarification has been given.
Is it a further point? So,
Well, is it a point of order for me or a point of clarification? Because the speech has come to an end.
I think it's a question for you, so I'm not sure if it's a point of order, but it's a question. So I wondered if it was appropriate to refer to a party that is
That's not a point of order.
Thank you, sir.
Conataba St Saviour.
Yes, thank you, sir. And St Saviour's has been mentioned, and as everybody knows, we do have most of the schools. Sadly, everything that's been coming out is for homes because they're desperately needed. But there's never been a mention in any of the plans or any of the part of the island, on the island plan, of schools. And I have said on numerous occasions, I do not want any more housing. If I want some places where the children can go and play and where they can have a school that's relevant to them. Deputy Gardner has been trying very, very hard. I sadly do not think that the Rouge Bouillon site is correct. But having said that, where else are they going to put a school for the children? And I really think they need to do it. Deputy Ward wanted a youth club on the gasworks. We were kind of promised one, but I don't know quite where that's gone, but that doesn't seem to be coming to fruition. There's no school on the waterfront, but there are homes on the waterfront. In St Saviour's on these fields that they wish to build on, that I'm really up against it and I'm not happy with. There's no mention of schools. I did not, but there is a board in the assembly where people sign to put children first. I didn't sign it because basically I put everybody first. Whoever needs help gets it. But we're falling down on the people. Well, I'm not. But the people that they asked and said they were going to support, they're not supporting the children. They're not supporting the youngsters. Deputy Ferguson is correct. The Sea Cadets have been looking for somewhere. The Sea Cadets is a wonderful establishment. And we want the youngsters to go there because it's better than hanging around on street corners. But we're not giving them the facilities to go there. So I really think we need to look at this island plan. We need to look at everything and support Ms. Nina Gardner for making sure that we have education for the youngsters and for the up until for the age of 18, I would have thought. But this isn't going to take us anywhere. We cannot, Deputy Young said, oh, we need homes. We don't need homes with families if we have nowhere for the families to go. Opposite St Saviour's Parish Hall here, we have a wonderful meadow. And we hear the children playing in there. And the little ones are all screaming and shouting. And it's sometimes in the winter they go home covered in mud. And they have had a ball because it's a facility that they don't have where they live. We build apartments, which is fabulous. They run 4 or 5 flights up. They may, if we're lucky, have a window that'll open out to the fresh air. But there's nowhere for them to play. Come on, everybody, get your act together and think of the children. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Tab. Deputy Labby.
Thank you, sir. I don't think I can support this last of the amendments because it seems to me arbitrary and potentially unhelpful. But the main proposition as amended I could support because it takes us to the situation we are in at the moment, in that Rouge Bouillon wouldn't be moved for the police station until alternatives could be found. That is what the review is all about. That is the situation. So we're having this debate this morning, which will probably go on for an hour and a half, and we will be at square one. But if members wanted that clarity, that's fine. Look, just now it's been mentioned Gas Place. So we're in a situation where it's like musical chairs. It's like things got stopped because of the hospital uncertainty, and that has an impact on my portfolio on providing new houses because there was everything is kept in aspect until we've got more certainty on the hospital side, and then what do we do with the others? And as members know, I've made a commitment to get more government sites by the end of this year announced and with the providers. So out of the disappointment of the Gas Place site for housing being turned down, springs opportunity, especially because of incredibly pragmatic and open-minded view by Andiam Homes, who've taken that refusal on the chin, and not dug their heels in, but started to look at that area of town, given the hotel sites being developed for apartments, look at that area, that whole area of town as one, with what we know will be needed as more amenity space. That then begs the question about can we get more park? There's a state's decision to put housing on there. Can we amend that? Can we get a bit more housing there? I mean, Deputy Ward will be pleased to know that with reference to his proposition about Gas Place, Property Holdings and all the departments concerned are already well ahead of the deputy, and he'll be pleased to know that. And so we're, of course, that now opens up the opportunity as a potential school site, Gas Place, possibly some more housing too, but essentially much more park. But of course, when that's an open secret, I mean, that's part of the review and is being looked at, and you know, plans will be drawn up, and we will all be able to have a look at them. But these things, these sort of decisions have to be taken extremely carefully, and it's not as simple as slamming in a proposition of this kind. Well, I've been there myself. It's because, of course, you know, once you saw when Deputy Ward's proposition came out about Gas Place and the idea of a school on there, which, as I say, is already in the pot. You get, you know, actually, you'd think that was universally popular and what a good idea. But no, of course, there's the issue of traffic, and all the comments down underneath it are, you know, negative in terms of traffic. So there's things like that have to be taken into consideration. I mean, saying there should be 2 schools, that probably seems sensible. What about if it should be 3? So I don't think, you know, Property Holdings will always, and the members will know the 2 principal officers. They are very approachable, and they will always have time for members, non-executive members and members, if you want to go to them and talk to them, dial them up on Teams, Tim or Ralph, and they will take you through it. The process, which they are the conduit for infrastructure, for housing and environment, for education, for housing, so working to try, and Home Affairs to try and get a solution. They're working extremely hard on it, and it's very well coordinated, and I'm really hopeful that we're going to make progress, and it's going to be better for Celia and better for our children. But let them do their work, what they are doing. And I'll just say this to I see that the Infrastructure Minister is about to speak, but as far as I'm concerned, no decision has been made on the Council of Ministers, the fire and ambulance service staying where they are, the fire station staying where it is. The arguments for that have been put very clearly by the Home Affairs Minister, and so that has been put to the Council of Ministers, and the alternative argument has been progressed by the Education Minister or ministers over the course of the last few months. So that, I hope, is helpful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Lewis.
Thank you, sir. In his opening speech, sir, Deputy Gardner suggested we should look at Google Earth, and I recommend that members do exactly that now. That Roosbyon School was an excellent school, but it's completely disjointed. I had the pleasure of having a guided tour recently from the headmaster, and it is a superb school, very, very dedicated staff, and I congratulate them. But the school has been added to so many times, it's completely disjointed, and it's a bit of a rabbit warren, but they do their best with what they have. If we had a blank sheet of paper, who would build a school for young children directly next to one of the busiest roundabouts we have on the island? That's not the way we should be going. If we started building into the old police station area, then it would be even more disjointed and nothing would actually join up at all. There's no direct link. Some of the buildings there have got preservation orders on, so they can't be touched. It is very, very complex. And conversely, fire and ambulance, Jersey Fire and Rescue and the ambulance service, they are in my opinion, the perfect location. They're just, 50 yards from Roosbyon roundabout, So they can go all points, north, south, east and west, and they are in the best position to get anywhere on the island as quickly as possible. I will leave it there, sir, and I will be speaking on the main debate. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Conatava St Helier.
Thank you, sir. It's not often I agree with the Minister for Infrastructure, but I have to say I agree with every word he said. The fire service is a good fit where it is. You know, there's a considerable heritage factor there that the buildings are not going to be able to be, I imagine, to be moved or altered, and the fire service is already in there, and they've got the extra space that has come from the relocation of the police station. And I also want to endorse what the Minister said, and indeed the Environment Minister said in his speech earlier, which is that the environmental degradation of this area is particularly hazardous for young lungs in that school. And indeed, that is why deputies for St Helier going back years, as well as myself as constable, have objected to the fact that the States has persistently prioritised other school developments over the redevelopment and possibly reciting of Rouge Bouillon School. We've seen smart new primaries being built out in the rural parishes. I'm sure they were well needed, but I would challenge anyone to say whether, in terms of the environment for young people, that you would find a worse place to site a primary school. And it does need moving, and it needs all the space that can be provided for it. I also agree with the Housing Minister, who has concerns about, and I think Deputy Young as well, they both have concerns about the precise wording of this amendment, because it does, however fast the review is, this proposition says that no site in states' ownership that could accommodate schools should be allocated for another purpose. And that really means that nothing can be done with any other site. And I have a particular interest if the extension to the Millennium Town Park site is deemed unsuitable for a new primary school. I would want that work to start on that site in converting it into an extension of the Millennium Town Park, as indeed Andiam Homes have decided they would wish to do. They're conscious, as I am, of the under provision of open space, the fact that Millennium Town Park is incredibly busy. It's almost, you could almost describe it as congested in the sort of weather we're having at the moment. And the potential marriage value of the existing town park with a similar sized space of grass and trees is incalculable, and will benefit not just young people, but people of all ages and people who live in the very densely populated part of town around the town park. So I want that work to be able to proceed to deliver an extended town park if the site is indeed not suitable for a primary school. But if I accept this amendment, I'm saying that that can't happen. And indeed, if there were to be something, if there were to be a problem with, dare I say it, the Overdale site for the hospital, that couldn't happen either, because we would have said no other sites in states' ownership can be allocated for any other purposes until the primary school review, not just the review has been completed, but the sites for primary schools have been allocated and approved. So I do have problems with the wording of this, and as I think the Housing Minister said, and possibly the Education Minister said, we already have a guarantee as a States Assembly that this site will not be passed on for any other use until the needs of the school have been established and sorted out. So I'm minded not to support this amendment because I think it does risk tying our hands as an Assembly, and we may find ourselves having to come back and rescind it in order to get on with another piece of important work. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conatava. Deputy Trinity, do you want to make a speech?
No, I just want to make a clarification, sir, only with regards to what was being said about the Sea Cadets. Yeah, so yeah, I would like to make a speech bearing in mind what I'm involved with regards to the Sea Cadets, if I may.
Yes.
Right, the situation is such that the Sea Cadets are on the Rouge Bullion site for 2 years. We're in the process of negotiating with them to look for another site. And I have to say things are progressing very well. So I can say that at the present time, the Sea Cadets won't be an issue with regards to this particular site. They've been given 2 years, or they were given 2 years, but because of the decanter Fort Regent and everything else, we are making sure that they will be going somewhere else other than that site. That's really what I wanted to clarify with some of the questions that were being asked about the Sea Cadets, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? Yes, Deputy Guida.
Okay, so fixing my fixing the IT on this side. Yes, I'll try to say everything now on while we're talking on the amendment to the amendment. I've been looking at this very, very carefully for the past few weeks and trying to find exactly where my position was, and it was quite difficult because remembering that I am also Assistant Minister for the Environment, I am involved in the island plan, and as such, we couldn't understand more the frustration of Deputy Gardner about the school estate. It's the Deputy Young and myself, the Minister and myself, will probably be quite happy to talk on that subject. It's one of our biggest frustrations, the fact that we could not put the new school estate, that we could not reserve sites in the island plan. And actually, we still have a hope that it could be done, that it is something that we could do as part of this island plan. But the strategic review of the school estate is quite advanced. I've seen a preview of it, and actually that's quite interesting. What I saw looked finished, but the fact that it isn't, and that the Minister for Education is still reluctant to publish it, shows the level of detail that you have to go into. So they showed some projects and possibilities, and everything looked extremely exciting. But every one of them needs to be dwelled in, needs to be detailed to the nth degree, and that's one of the things about the state's the state's real estate. Is that it is very, very complex. One of the things that Deputy Crowcroft, Constable Crowcroft, of course, mentioned it himself. One of the difficulties is that there are no green fields in St. Helier. There are no green spaces that we can say, well, you know, that's 5,000 square meter or 15,000 square meter, therefore we can put a school in it, and we could just put a flag in, and that would do it. Everything is taken, everything is used for something. So if we want to put a school somewhere, we probably need to move something else. And that something else needs to go elsewhere, where you also need to move whatever was there before. So to start to say, well, we don't do anything and still, you know, flag has been planted and the school has to be there, is actually extremely, extremely difficult. Now, we very quickly mentioned the word a sacrosanct site about the Fire and Ambulance Station. And yes, it is for Home Affairs. But of course, Home Affairs is just one ministry, and the other ministries need to make their point, need to make the point as well. So right now, there is a review between Education and Home Affairs to see what we also actually allocated to. What I can say is that
there's some suggestion that there's some, forgive me, Deputy, there's some suggestion that some members can't hear you. There's some suggestion that the difficulty might be here. We can hear you speak, but some members can't.
I do hear some echo.
Yes, there's a very bad echo, sir.
Sir, I believe when this has happened in the past, it's because the speakers have been too sensitive in the assembly. So you might have to turn down the volume slightly.
Yes. Yeah, you turn that off as well. Unplug that, please. See what we can do.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, Deputy Giddy, you want to carry on speaking and see if that's improved things for members?
So, thank you, sir. Yes, I was talking about the position of Home Affairs on the site, and basically, we've studied many sites, many possibilities for a joint fire and ambulance station around the island. We've really looked at everything and did a very detailed study on response times and all the other factors that that were necessary to look at to decide on a new site. And one thing came back quite strongly was that anywhere other than in the center of town, response times were going to increase. So because most of the incidents happen inside town, to be inside town to start with shaves about 1.5 to 2 minutes to the response time. For most interventions, whether they're fire or health related, that's 1.5 minutes can be the difference between life and death. So this was really important to us. The other point, and again, being involved with planning certainly helped me understand that, is that it would be almost impossible to select another site within town for the fire and ambulance station and get a planning approval because the opposition would just be too much. The site where it is has been there for 70 years. It's accepted. People understand the nuisance, and it is fine. It is accepted. If we try to move that anywhere else in town, we would have 5,000 oppositions. We would have demonstrations, and it would just not happen. And that's a historical fact in any other city where this had to happen. So if we get the fire and ambulance station outside of town, it will never ever come back, and we will have to add 1.5 to 2 minutes to any response time inside town. And I would like to mention that schools do occasionally catch fire, and that children occasionally have to be taken to hospital rapidly. So to say that we are not thinking about children, we are actually thinking about children. Now, another interesting thing, and we were talking about moving things around to make them fit the best. The best thing that could happen to the fire and ambulance station is if the Rouge Bouillon school was moved, because then we would have access to a site twice as large, and we could redesign the fire and ambulance station in something much more practical. So it is actually in the interest of the fire and ambulance station that Rouge Bouillon school is relocated in a more suitable site. So again, I understand the deputy's frustration, in fact desperation, because she went as far as taking our fire station hostage to her desires. And I will push as much as I can this government, and certainly on the other side, on the environment side, to include in the island plan reservations for schools in Saint-Hélier. It's one of our most important developments. So I completely agree with her, but I'm really worried that this particular proposition will actually tie our hands and make it more difficult to develop schools in town. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? I call upon Deputy Gardner to reply.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry, sir, I put in the chat I'd like to speak. Deputy Massel here, sorry.
All right, Deputy Massel.
Thank you, sir. I just want to contribute to this debate because these discussions were happening when I was Education Minister, and I just want to inform members of what happened to my side. So it was one of the education meetings on a Monday morning, and one of the officers raised something on the agenda, and they said, "Oh, we'd just like to talk to you about the Rouge Bouillon site." I was like, "Okay, fine, please tell me." And they said, "Oh, well, we want to inform you that the Justice and Home Affairs Department and the Infrastructure Department have become quite progressed with their plans for the new fire and ambulance station on the Rouge Bouillon site. And we'd like to arrange to have you in a meeting with the Home Affairs Minister in order to discuss this." To which I said, "Well, wait a minute, where's the review for education and where's the review for housing? Because I know they're supposed to all come together." "Oh, well, we haven't really been able to progress our side, this being the Sites Department." and housing hasn't even been touched. So I said, well, absolutely not. I'm not going into a meeting with the Home Affairs Minister where I'm going to be presented with a fait accompli when the Sites Department hasn't done its work. So I declined that and say, right to the Infrastructure Minister, pulling up an answer which was put in the Assembly when I was Assistant Minister, and I'm sure Deputy Gardner will have it as part of her notes, about how the Minister for Infrastructure gave the Assembly the undertaking that before any decision was made, that all the reviews, housing, SIPES and Justice and Home Affairs would have been concluded. Now, I got a letter back from the Infrastructure Minister saying, oh, well, you know, Justice and Home Affairs have really progressed very, very well. So I said, fine. So I said, no, we're going to raise it as a Council of Ministers now. So eventually I raised it at Council of Ministers and eventually managed to get Council to agree that no decision would be made on the Rouge Bouillon site until Education had actually concluded its work. And I should point out to members that there are two reports which are needed. One is not only the school estates review, which needs to happen, but it's also the catchment area review, because again, that needs to be looked at in conjunction with this. So those are two actually detailed reports which need to be done before a decision on the Rouge Bouillon site has been made. And there was a bit of toing and froing, and we were assured that, you know, the decision would be made with the by Council of Ministers. And I said, brilliant, well, thank you for that undertaking. I'm sure it will be minuted. I waited for the next meeting of the Council of Ministers to see the minutes. I noticed that that undertaking wasn't there, to which I pointed that out when we were discussing the minutes, and thankfully the Chief Minister said, no, I do recall that, and that is what we agreed. So it was quickly put into the minutes. So can I urge members, on this particular site, it is incredibly important to support Deputy Gardner and her amendments in order to ensure that Education is given a fair crack of the whip in this situation, because I feel that for some reason or another, and I don't know what it is, it seems that the other elements, education and housing, haven't had a proper chance to be looked at this site. And I can't give a reason as to why that is, but I think in order to safeguard this particular site, that's what needs to be done, and we need to support it. Deputy Gardner today, I'm thankful for her for bringing this situation to light, because I was having this battle in the background with other ministers. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Conor St John.
Thank you, sir. It seems to me that the Home Affairs Minister has just made an excellent case for keeping accident and emergency at Gloucester Street, given his concerns about the additional time for the majority of people in St Helier. Sir, we can't move the families. There are an enormous population around Rouge Bouillon School, and we need a joined up strategy. The catchment review is really, really long overdue. We have pupils attending St John's School, for example, from Georgetown, and we have children who live right next to the school, the adjoining property, who go to Plat d'Oeil School because there's not enough room at St John. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, hopefully in a very short period of time, to sort out the catchment review and to look at Rouge Bouillon as a whole. The fire service appear to have been able to expand into the police station without any restraint at all. And once you're in, it's like squatters' rights. It's difficult to get people out. So I'd urge members to support Deputy Gardner's amendment and her proposal and put some focus on the families and children of Rouge Bouillon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conor. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? The adjournment has been proposed by Deputy Morell in the chat. Is that seconded? By anyone?
Yes, sir.
Anyone wish to oppose the adjournment at this stage? Thank you. The Assembly is adjourned until 2:15.